We appreciate you being here today on this Thursday morning for our Minerals Committee meeting. Just a reminder to silence your cell phones. And there's some that have probably going to have some jet lag today. There's many that came from Washington late last night. But appreciate those that are here. And if your neighbor starts dozing off, just nudge them a little bit. But we're appreciative of all those that have shown up here, and it looks like we've got a large crowd today for those that are on Zoom land. So Heather, would you call the roll, please?
Senator Cooper.
Here.
Senator Jones. Senator Nethercott. Senator Rothfuss.
Here.
Representative Campbell.
Here.
Representative Knapp.
Here.
Representative Larson. Representative Lawley.
Here.
Representative Riggins.
Here.
Representative Schmidt.
Excused.
Representative Tarver.
Here.
Representative Weber.
Here.
Co-Chairman Anderson.
Here.
Co-Chairman Heiner.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right. Thank you, Heather. Members, for our first order of business, we need to approve the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from our last meeting? And is there any discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
move
Mr.
to
Co-Chair.
approve.
Thank you. Moved by Co-Chair Anderson, seconded by Representative Lawley. Is there any discussion about the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Our first order of business is severance tax exemption. So Brian, or Representative, or not representative, but Mr. Fuller, would you lead us through this?
Yep, Mr. Chairman, just Brian's fine. So Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, 27 LSO 19, draft 0.4, enhanced oil recovery severance tax exemption reporting. In 2026, the legislature enacted House Bill 128, which provides a severance tax exemption for certain enhanced oil recovery projects. All this bill draft does is clarify to whom the Department of Revenue's annual report on that exemption should be sent. Page 2, line 7, all the bill does is just specifies that the annual report from the Department of Revenue goes to this committee and to Joint Revenue. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions, committee members? Mr. Fuller, wasn't there also a concern about retaining the earnings off of this fund, within the fund?
So Mr. Chairman, that might be a different bill draft. This was just a simple cleanup dealing with a severance tax exemption. I think while there may have been discussion about how that was the payment, this one was simply intended to be a cleanup draft.
Okay, I'm on a different bill already. I'm sorry. That's on the bonding thing. So yeah. Okay. All right. So any other questions? Seeing no questions from the committee, we'll open this up for public testimony. We'll we have a bunch here in the room. Would you please be orderly in your fashion as you come up to testify? We have 3 chairs up here, so there'll be a batter's box.
All right.
Going once, going twice. Anybody online, Heather? Wow.
There was one.
It's okay. Encourage him.
Brett Fanning.
No one online. Mr. Fanning's not there.
Oh,
Well, we're all dressed up for the prom and our date doesn't show up.
yeah. Yeah, we got stood up again.
Okay, with that, we will close public testimony. Members of the committee, what is your pleasure?
The bill.
Moved by Representative Lawley. Do I have a second by Co-Chair Anderson? Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, could we get a little more detail on that change from Mr. Fuller?
Yes, Mr. Fuller, you.
No, no, not really.
Maybe we need to go line by line or word by word.
Taking amendments.
Yeah.
Any punctuation you want to change?
No, I don't think so. I think it's all right. I think
Okay.
it's all right.
It's a heavy hitter.
Do I hear a question being called?
Question on the bill.
Question on the bill being called. All those in favor signify by,
Paul, sir.
oh, it is a roll call.
Roll
Okay.
call. Yeah, a bill for a.
All right, Heather, you're up.
This is a roll call for 27 LSO 19 Enhanced Oil Recovery Severance Tax Exemption Reporting. Senator Cooper?
Aye.
Senator Jones? Senator Nethercott? Senator Rothfuss?
Aye.
Representative Campbell? Representative Knapp?
Aye.
Representative Larson?
Aye.
Representative Lawley? Aye. Representative Riggins?
Aye.
Representative Schmidt excused. Representatives Tarver?
Aye.
Representative Weber? Aye. Co-Chairman Anderson?
Aye.
Chairman Heiner?
Aye.
That passed.
Yeah.
Okay. That one,
Which one?
as Co-Chair Anderson is famously says, that squeaked by. So that will be a bill draft that will be moved forward to the session this next winter in January.
I think we could take it in the Senate.
You think you could handle this
I
one?
think we could handle this. I think
All
we
right.
could.
Okay, so that'll be a Senate bill, Senate file. Okay, committee, I propose that we move produced water, oil and gas up on the docket in our agenda in front of industrial siding because if we do industrial siding first, maybe this large crowd will start filtering out and we want to retain them.
We'll
keep them
lose our
here.
crowd.
So are there any objections to moving produced water up and dealing with that now?
No.
Seeing no objections,
No objection.
Mr. Fuller, let's start on this next bill draft. Water and oil.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, 27 LSO 22 draft 0.4 regulation of produced water for oil and gas purposes. This is 4-01 in the online meeting materials. This bill draft, which is based on language that the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission provided to the committee in April, would authorize the commission to regulate produced water for specified oil and gas purposes. So on page 2, line 8, this is a new paragraph in 35104D, which provides that the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission has authority to regulate. And Mr. Chairman, I would just note on lines 4 and 5, this excludes discharges that are permitted under the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. So those discharges of produced water would still, certain ones would still be under DEQ. What this does, Mr. Chairman, beginning on line 8, provides that the commission has the authority to regulate the location, construction, operation, and reclamation of all produced water pits, pipelines, and other infrastructure that are used solely for the storage, transport, and treatment of produced water that is used in oil and gas exploration and production. And this would include transfers of that produced water for reuse in exploration and production. The bill draft would be effective July 1, 2027. With that, Mr. Chairman, happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fuller. Committee, any questions for LSO? Representative Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fuller, so are we basically establishing ownership with this to where, as far as production water being looked at as an asset, as a commodity rather than a waste byproduct? Is that how I'm understanding this?
So, Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, that's not quite what this bill draft does. All this bill draft really concerns is who has the authority to regulate the use and reuse of produced water. This just specifies that the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission would regulate these uses of produced water. There is language in Title 41 that talks more about, and the term in that part of statute is byproduct water. This bill draft does not impact or address any of those points.
Follow up?
Thank you for the clarification and no further follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee? Co-Chair Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, So if we have produced water that we're going to use for municipal use, that we're going to clean up and use for municipal use, that would still come under the DEQ. This does not change that.
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Anderson, that's correct. This only concerns the use of produced water and its associated infrastructure for oil and gas purposes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Mr. Fuller, so we've heard a lot about data centers utilizing produced water, and how would this affect that in any way?
Mr. Chairman, unless those data centers are involved in oil and gas, I don't think that would change anything here.
Okay.
Still be DEQ.
Okay. All right, Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fuller, you used the word on line 12, including transfers. Did you contemplate using including but not limited to, or would that confuse things? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, we could use that for brevity, just went with including. That makes clear that this is just one specific thing that's called out for commission authority.
Follow up? Okay, with that, we'll open it up for public well, no, we got Mr. Kropatch. Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Tom Kropatch. I'm the Oil and Gas Supervisor for the Oil and Gas Commission. I think we probably talked about details about produced water at the last meeting. And so I think maybe I'll not necessarily make comments on this other than to thank Mr. Fuller for writing up the language appropriately and what we had suggested, and maybe just open it up, take comments or take questions from the committee if they have those.
Mr. Kropatch, would you just give us a short nexus why we need this, just to refresh the committee members?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. We are seeing industry want to use more produced water in the state. They already do use produced water or reuse produced water in their operations. But for many operators, they don't have enough. They don't make enough produced water in their operations, and so they would like to be able to transfer water between operators for uses such as hydraulic fracturing. That would allow them to purchase less fresh water and also dispose of less water, which are both, I think, beneficial to the industry, ultimately reducing their cost, making Wyoming's production more competitive with other areas and allows activity to continue. The issue that we see in the current statutes without this language is that there is a cost associated with transferring water between operators. They've got to provide the infrastructure and provide the treatment and potentially ultimately at some point in time disposal of that water. And so they need to be able to charge back and forth for taking the water, treating it, storing it, reusing it, disposing it. So that becomes a potential commercial operation, which the current statute does not allow us to permit that infrastructure. And it really doesn't allow anyone to permit the infrastructure. The DEQ's language now allows them to permit commercial disposal facilities, but there's kind of a gap in regulation or statute on reuse facilities that are commercial. And so this language would clarify that. As I stated at the last meeting, the commission already has authority to do this if it's non-commercial. So if an operator is taking their own produced water, treating it, storing it, reusing it, we already permit all of that process. This just opens up the ability to do it as a commercial operation as well. And, I think in the long run, beneficial for everyone to be able to reuse the produced water instead of using fresh water for these operations as much as possible.
Good, thank you. Questions? We'll start with Co-Chair Anderson.
Transferring between producers, what kind of distance are we talking that this is economical to do? Is this a mile or 10 miles? Or I'm assuming they're piping it and pumping it, not hauling it with trucks.
Mr. Chairman and Co-Chairman Anderson, I think tens of miles is probably common. They will truck some of it, especially between operators. You know, the infrastructure build out would probably be kind of in a core area, and then outlying wells that could be utilized could be trucked into that infrastructure, or maybe trucked into a common loadout, you know, where they'd haul to. So the pipelines that we see out to the wells, the last, you know, mile type scenario becomes typically kind of temporary lines, lay flat hoses and things like that they can use while they're doing a hydraulic fracturing job. And then in some cases, you know, the operators will put permanent pipelines into their infrastructure, especially if it's the single operator. But if they're pulling water from other operators' wells in the nearby area, the trucking will still occur. It'll just be over a much shorter distance to help reduce those costs. So,
And those temporary lines, they're just running them on the ground, aren't they, on the surface? They're not burying those. Are they?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Anderson, the temporary lines, correct, they just run across the surface. They would bury, you know, the more permanent lines as they go down kind of their core infrastructure area. But the temporary would be removed after a certain amount of time.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Kropatch, I'm going to ask you that same question on the but not limited to. Do you think that just helps add clarity that you aren't limited to that? Or is the language fine as it is? What are your thoughts?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Larson, I think the language is fine as it is. We did write it very specifically for reuse and for transfers, because we wanted to make it clear that we weren't trying to permit or be able to permit like a commercial oil field waste disposal facility, for example, that the DEQ has the authority for. So we wrote it very limited to reusing the water within the industry and the infrastructure associated with that.
Follow up. Representative Riggins, you look like you have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kropatch, where does hydro test water, does that fall under the category of produced water? Or do you know?
Mr. Chairman, I think it could. Some of these kind of specific scenarios, we sometimes have to look at where it came from, what the use was, what other, if anything, what else was added to it, if anything. In some cases, the produced water fits into certain areas of federal regulation. And so then, as an example, in the treatment process, depending on what's done or what's added, it may disqualify parts of that from going to a Class 2 disposal well, for example. And so we have to kind of look at specific scenarios of what the process is and what it's used for to determine, you know, what we can do with it on the back end, especially as it relates to disposal.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it wouldn't have any impact on us. You got a wastewater, you got a discharge permit you have to get for that practice. We wouldn't be transferring that duty to anybody else like you versus the DEQ.
Mr. Chairman, it depends on what they wanted to transfer it for. This would not have any impact on those discharge permits. That is a DEQ program, and they have primacy from EPA for that. And so discharge, you know, to a creek or a river or something like that, this would not impact at all. But if you had that water and if it was appropriate quality that an operator could use it for their hydraulic fracturing operation, for example, they could potentially take some of that water and use it there. We'd have to look at the specific scenario, but it is I think it would be a potential option for the use of that water.
Representative Knapp, you have a hand on your face. I don't know if it's yours or Heather's. Okay. All right. It was Heather's mouse that was on your
Thanks for
face.
letting me know. I couldn't feel it.
Do you have any questions while you're on there?
No, I do not. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
So, Mr. Kropatch, just hypothetically, if a producer had some pretty clean water, and we know CBM producers do have some very clean water. If they wanted to sell some of that water to a data center, would this impede that?
Mr. Chairman, no, this wouldn't impact that at all, in my opinion. That water, if it's appropriate, whatever the water is, even if it's just standard produced water from a horizontal well, let's say, if they wanted to use it outside the industry, that would go through, the state engineer's office to appropriate that water because it would be put to a beneficial use at that point, and then potentially DEQ depending on the source. But I think, CBM water, for example, I think could go to just with an SEO permit agreement with the operator and the appropriator that it's being transferred to them. So, and this change wouldn't affect that at all.
Okay, great. All right. Any further questions, committee? Yes, Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You brought that up about selling the produced water. So I'm going to guess there's still going to be some, if there's going to transfer of ownership, you have to have some analysis done to the water itself and do for VOCs or whatever might be left over in the water. So that, I don't know how that would be played out, maybe between the producer and the consumer on that particular transaction, what they would do with it.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Riggins, I think your statement there at the end is correct. It depends on what the uses are and the two parties and what they need for water quality. So we would not require, for example, a transfer between two operators. We would, for hydraulic fracturing, let's say, we would not necessarily require a water sample to be collected for that. The operator taking the water might want a sample to make sure it's appropriate, that there's not a constituent in there that would impact their hydraulic fracturing, the chemicals that might be used, or they, need to know what the quality is so they know which chemicals are appropriate to use with that water quality. But from our standpoint, if it's that use, if it's produced water, we wouldn't necessarily require a water sample in that scenario.
Okay. Any other questions, committee, for Mr. Kropach? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony and for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'll open this up to public testimony now. Oh, we're seeing some movement. Good morning, Mr. Obermueller.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Pleasure to see you all this morning. Pete Obermueller, President of the Petroleum Association of Wyoming. Mr. Chairman, I just want to reiterate, we support the bill. Supervisor Kropach pointed out the benefit to industry, of course, of having this tool to have a process for commercial. I do just want to point out, it probably goes without saying, but it is also a benefit to Wyoming that we can use less and less fresh water. I think that's probably obvious, but I wanted to say it out loud.
That's a good point, Mr. Obermueller. All right, any questions for Mr. Pete Obermueller? We can't let him off without some questions.
I have a question.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, how many producers do you think we have that actually have produced water, that extra produced water? Do all of them or just?
Mr. Chairman, you might have to help me with that. What you mean by extra produced water? You mean beyond what they use for their own?
Yeah.
I don't know that I can put a number to that. I don't know that we have any extra. We are very starved for water, quite frankly. So I think I mentioned last time that it's already upwards of 70% of the water we use in the Powder River Basin is already recycled. So it's sort of on a well by well basis. Mr. Kropach, maybe I'll just stop talking. I'm just going to stop talking right now and let Mr. Kropach take that.
Oh, sure. Call up the expert. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I think I can provide some data on produced water and help clarify that question. And I'll maybe start with big picture, just statewide, and kind of work down into where we think this really becomes a real benefit. But in 2025 in Wyoming, the industry produced 1.5 billion barrels of produced water. So it's about 60 billion gallons roughly. The issue with that is, we produce a lot of water, but it's not always where we need it to be for the end use. So almost half of the produced water is actually produced by one operator in the Bighorn Basin. And so obviously we're not going to use that water in hydraulic fracturing operations in the Powder River Basin. We're not going to move it that far, but they reuse 500 million barrels in their own operations for water floods. So a majority of that water is probably recycled. You know, it's reinjected, produced, reinjected. Then they dispose of about 100 million barrels a year, and the other 100 million is various uses like surface discharge and some of those things. When we talk about Powder River Basin, horizontal production in the Powder River Basin made about 150 million barrels in 2025, so much less overall the operators in the Powder River Basin from horizontal wells. But almost all of that water could be reused. If you look at the size of a hydraulic fracturing operation today, it's generally 500 million barrels per job. And so that roughly would be about 300 wells, which is roughly the number of number of wells drilled in Wyoming every year. So, you know, we could get close to utilizing all of the available produced water in the Powder River Basin for reuse in hydraulic fracturing operations.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I think I have my numbers wrong. I've got 1.5 million barrels of produced water in the state, right?
Or billion.
Mr. Chairman, billion.
Oh,
With a
billion,
B.
okay.
It's bigger than a.
Oh, a B.
And to put that in perspective, is that a size of a reservoir? Which reservoir would that be?
Mr. Chairman, I didn't
Is that
put
like-
that together.
Is that like Pathfinder we're circulating every year?
I'm not sure on that, Mr. Chairman. I didn't compare size of that to.
Or those
a
of us
reservoir.
yeah.
Bigger than Flaming Gorge right now.
Yeah, it's almost drivable. Say, yes, Representative Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. How, if we're just kind of on par, and if we were to increase our drilling capabilities, I think we got 13 drilling rigs in there right now.
16.
16?
16.
Okay. If we were to increase that, because I'd like to see that number somewhere around 35, 40, would it balance out? Because I know that optimistically, we're looking at potential reuse for some of this water. But as Mr. Obermuller stated that we use most of that back in the drilling process. So if we expand our drilling platform, would there realistically be any water available for any reuse, or would we possibly be in a shortage where we would actually need more water to increase exploration? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, at first, there is a lag time. You know, the rigs come online, you frack the well. The rig drills the well, you frack it. When it comes online and starts making produced water, then you can utilize that. So if you increase rigs for a time period, they're going to need new water, fresh water most likely, because those new wells aren't online that they're drilling. But as time goes by and those rigs start to drill more wells, then you'll have more produced water available that you could use. So there's a little bit of a lag time at the beginning that as new rigs come in, they would have to be purchasing fresh water typically. But then as the wells come online that they drill, you could utilize that water for the next well, for example. So it's just kind of a lag time between additional rigs and then more produced water.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'm just trying to get my mind around this because I see this kind of cyclical in the fact that right now in the Powder, I don't know how many ducks we have out there, but there's a bunch. So as drilling increases, I'm just wondering, what that looks like, how that balances out, because it seems like it does go in cycles.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. New drilling, less produced water over time, you'd make more as the wells are online. And then let's say drilling in the future slows down. Now you have excess produced water because you're not drilling as many, but you had those additional wells online. So the produced water kind of trails the new rigs by a certain amount of time, probably 6 to 9 months, depending on if they get them online right away. What we generally see is from the time you spud a well till the time you get first production is somewhere around 6 months to 9 months. By the time the frac crew gets in and does their work and you get the well hooked into the infrastructure. And so.
Mr. Chairman, it's just a quick follow up to Representative Campbell too. And for those of you that may not know it, when the representative talks about ducks, he's not talking about like waterfowl. He means drilled but uncompleted ducks. That's an industry term. And we do have a fair amount of those. That's true. I do just want to point out, Representative Campbell, that it's sometimes a moving target of having conversations with some engineers in my membership about how some of the wells that have previously been drilled and were producing quite a lot of the resource right away we're starting to see more water come out of them later on. And it's a challenge that we're trying to work through in some of these places, that there's the water production kind of starting to increase a little bit in some wells. And I say that just to point out that to the co-chairman's question about extra, it is kind of well specific. You can have extra sometimes, and having a bill like this would allow then to kind of put it where we need to put it. And one last point on the Bighorn Basin for some of you that are up there. The interesting thing about all the water that they produce up there is it is a little bit of higher quality. It can, with some relatively minor, in the scheme of things, treatment, can be used for agriculture, wildlife purposes. Some of it is discharged into the Bighorn River because it meets that quality, et cetera.
Follow up, Representative?
Thank you, Pete, for that. And that is exactly where I was trying to get to, because it is pretty much basin specific. You know, you look over there around Shoshone, over in that neck of the woods, Lost Cabin area. They have the potential for exploration over there is incredible, but the amount of water that they receive is also incredible, to where that's where I guess I'm trying to find balance as to where I really love this idea. I think this is just a super duper idea, but I'm trying to see I'm just trying to understand how it's going to work in reality with, you know, the option of looking at going to other manufacturing opportunities and such, and how we're going to find balance in that. Because I think, I don't know how you can address that as just a total herd shot, because it is so individual. If that makes sense. It's hard to throw a blanket over the state of Wyoming when there's so many variances in there, and I just want to make sure that we're kind of factoring that in when we think about this. Thank you.
Went to that, or?
Mr. Chairman, I would just state that that is correct. It is really basin specific, and the problem with, you know, reuse around the state is it's the transportation is too expensive to move it, you know, from Wind River or Bighorn Basin into the Powder, where, you know, most of the drilling activity currently exists. So it really is a basin specific use, but, you know, having that water available in other areas might be attractive to other potential uses as well, you know, outside the industry.
Okay. So just a fun fact, I checked with my research assistant, Google, and she says that 1.5 billion barrels of water is equivalent to what Fremont Lake in Sublette County holds. And it's about half the size of Fontenelle Reservoir in Lincoln County, and about a fifth the size of Pathfinder. So, fun fact. All right, co-chair.
Generally, does an oil well produce more water than a gas well? I'm not familiar with gas wells producing a lot of water, but maybe they do.
Mr. Chairman and Co-Chairman Anderson, it's just really dependent. For example, the wells that Representative Campbell was discussing, you know, by Shoshone, or, you know, the Manita Divide area, produce a lot of water. Those are gas wells. So it really is just formation specific. If you look at across the state, the Niobrara Formation, which is our largest oil producing formation right now, only produces actually about a half a barrel of water for every barrel of oil. And if you look at what just blanket across the state, we're doing about 14 barrels of water for every barrel of oil. So, you know, it really is formation specific.
And Mr. Kropatch, it's the economics of a gas well that makes a lot of water. They usually don't. They usually get plugged because you don't make a lot of revenue off of the gas if it makes a lot of water. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, gas prices are not great right now.
Yeah. So oil you can afford to deal with a lot of water, but gas, it doesn't make enough money to deal with that. Senator Cooper, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kropatch,
I'm going to step out on a limb here and go back to what the bill says instead of, we're kind of been out in the weeds here. All you're asking for is the authority to regulate this produced water if a producer chooses to reuse it or to transfer it. We're talking about a lot of other things here that don't really relate to what we're actually doing here. Is that correct? Is that how you're reading this?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Cooper, that's correct. The bill itself has no impact on some of those outside uses or anything else. It is really just for reuse in the industry between operators.
Okay. Short
Yep.
follow-up.
Yes. Senator.
Okay, this is not requiring an operator to reuse his water. This is just giving you the authority to supervise the reuse of that water.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Cooper, that's correct. It just allows us really to permit the infrastructure to do so, even if it's a commercial operation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Kopech.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other public testimony on this? Anybody online, Heather? No one online? Last chance? Public testimony? All right, well, with that, we'll close public testimony on produced water, oil, and gas. Committee members, what's your pleasure?
Move bill.
Boy, that's enthusiastic, isn't that? I think we're ready to move the bill. Moved by Co-Chair Anderson, seconded by Representative Lawley. Any discussion, members? Question being called. This is going to be another roll call vote.
This is the
Heather?
roll call for 27 LSO 22, regulation of produced water for oil and gas purposes. Senator Cooper? Senator Jones? Senator Nethercott? Senator Rothfuss?
Aye.
Representative Campbell? Representative Knapp?
Aye.
Representative Larson?
Aye.
Representative Lawley? Aye. Representative Riggins?
Aye.
Representative Schmidt, excused. Representative Tarver?
Aye.
Representative Weber?
Aye.
Co-Chairman Anderson?
Aye.
Chairman Heiner?
Aye.
That passed.
All right, thank you, Heather. We will make that a House bill, if that's okay, Mr. Co-Chair.
Yeah, your pleasure, sir.
You had the hard one, we'll take the easy one.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, moving along to industrial siding. Impact assistant payments, payment and bonding. Mr. Fuller.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, 27 LSO 21, impact assistance payments, prepayments, and bonding. This is 3-01 in the online meeting materials. This bill draft would authorize the prepayment of an impact assistance payments that they're typically made from sales tax revenues for industrial siding facilities and would require the facility applicant to submit a bond to the Department of Environmental Quality to cover the amount of that prepayment. The staff comment on the bottom of page 1 and the top of page 2 just notes that with the repeal of the use tax statutes in the 2026 budget session, the bill is about half the length that these impact assistance payment bill drafts have typically been. Then, Mr. Chairman, we'll move on to this is quite a lengthy subsection in 3911 or 3915-111 C. And so we move to page 4 for the new language that would address the topic of the bill draft. So first, starting on page 4, line 5, it provides that the Industrial Siding Council may include a prepayment that would be made before the period of construction begins in the impact assistance payment schedule. Then on lines 8 and 9, that prepayment shall not exceed 20% of the total impact assistance payment that is made to an affected county, city, or town. That 20% figure is, of course, a matter for committee consideration. Then on line 10, a new sentence that says a prepayment that's authorized shall be distributed by the Department of Revenue not later than 45 days after the industrial siding permit is issued. Any permit that the Industrial Siting Council issues that includes a prepayment must also include a condition that the permit applicant submit a bond to the Department of Environmental Quality to cover the amount of the prepayment. And then any bond, this is on beginning on line 18, any bond that's required under the subsection must be submitted to the Department of Environmental Quality not later than 45 days after the permit is issued. Then, Mr. Chairman, move on to page 8, and there's a staff comment about this new language. And really, it's just, so the first part of the comment on kind of page 8, line 11, just notes that the term period of construction that is used in that new language is defined in 3915-111D. And I just included that, that definition for the committee's consideration. Then beginning on line 29 are just a number of other considerations for the committee to ponder with the bill draft. First, as I mentioned before, the maximum percentage of the prepayment, the 20% was the figure that was included in the provided language from April. The next consideration the committee may wish to think about is whether language concerning forfeiture of the bond should be included in the bill draft. So if a permittee does not proceed with an industrial facility, or if the scope of construction of the industrial facility is reduced to where a lower impact and subsequently a lower impact assistance payment would be available, and then on page 9, whether language should be included to specify the disposition of a prepayment if a project is later canceled or reduced in scope. The next consideration would be whether the Industrial Siting Council should have discretion to require a bond. As the language was provided, it's mandatory. So if there's a prepayment, there must be a bond. And then finally, whether additional language or requirements for prepayment are needed in statute. Page 9, line 16, this bill draft and the prepayment requirement would apply to all impact assistance payments that are made as a result of industrial facility permit applications that are submitted on and after July 1st, 2027, which is the effective date of the bill draft. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Committee members, questions? Mr. Fuller, if this 20% advance payment is made, would that reduce the other payments throughout the construction period? Or would that just come off of the end of the payment schedule or at the beginning? How would that work?
So Mr. Chairman, that is not really contemplated in the bill draft. And so I would interpret that to mean the Industrial Siting Council would determine the remaining payment schedule in light of the prepayment that would be made in a particular situation.
Okay. Other questions? Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fuller, on that 20%, I know that's an arbitrary number that we just kind of put in there as a placeholder, but what kind of qualifiers do we have to base that number off of? And for example, if a large project has specific requirements like emergency medical services, fire suppression, something like that, that had requirements that taxpayers have to spend money preemptively for this project. Like if a solar project required a special type of fire truck or something like that, that had to be pre-ordered in advance and stuff, we need to have some sort of criteria to base what the taxpayer is going to be on the hook for, to where whatever bonding requirements, whatever percentage we put in there has got to account for those things. We can't just go willy-nilly with it. Does that make sense?
So Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, I think I understand maybe the question, and which I would distill as what must a local governmental entity seeking an impact assistance payment show in order to receive a prepayment? Maybe paraphrasing your question. The bill draft does not specify, and so I think that would be left to the Industrial Siting Council to determine the process by which a local government entity could seek a prepayment, and then the process by which the Industrial Siting Council would award a prepayment. The bill draft does not provide those details.
All right. Any other questions? Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are these payments direct distribution to the entity who, if it's a city, is it directly to the city? Do you know?
So, Mr. Chairman, Representative Riggins, I just have to find the page it's on in this subsection. So on page 2 of the bill draft, this is actually in current statute, how those payments are distributed. So they are first made to the county treasurer. This is page 2, lines 19 and 20. And then the county treasurer distributes those payments to the county, the cities and towns of that county. And then further on page 2, line 24, the Industrial Siting Council determines the amount of each payment that would be made to the county treasurer if there is a payment schedule. So that's, Mr. Chairman, that's already, Representative Riggins already provided in current law.
So follow up to that question. Thank you for bringing that up, Representative Riggins. So if there's a municipality that justifies this advance payment of 20%, Mr. Fuller, because they need to buy a fire truck or some long lead item, would then the 20% go to the county treasurer and that's dispersed to all of the entities? And so the county and other municipalities and impacted communities, or how would that work?
So Mr. Chairman, the bill draft doesn't precisely contemplate that. But I assume that in the Industrial Siting Council's order, the order would specify to whom, just like they would now for, if there's multiple affected, cities and towns in a county, that the county, the schedule order would include for payments would include X goes to this city, Y goes to this town. I assume it would be a similar process for the prepayment. The prepayment goes to, an X amount to this particular city or town, and in which case the county treasurer would distribute that payment accordingly.
Okay. Well, when Jenny gets up here, she can give us her vision of how this will work. So, okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Any further questions? Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if you modified that arrangement where those payments didn't have to go directly to the treasurer, but went directly to the person submitting the claim, would that be a conflict of some other statutes?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Riggins, I think first that would be a decision for the committee. Second, I think there would probably need to be some change in language in the bill draft, likely on pages 2 and 3, to contemplate that prepayments be made to, directly to a city or town rather than the county treasurer for distribution.
Okay, seeing no further questions, we will move on to who's next? Nancy Vihar and Jenny. Looks like.
People that know how it works.
So these are some good questions for the Industrial Siting Commission. Council. Ms. Staben?
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, committee members. I'm Jenny Staben, the Administrator of Industrial Siting at DEQ. And with me today is our Deputy Nancy Vare, who's the Deputy of the Department of Environmental Quality, and she will be leading the discussion today.
Okay.
Yep.
Spare?
Thank you, committee. Director Parfit extends his regrets at not being able to be here today. And thank you for going through the overview of the bill. That's one of the importance and purposes for industrial siting is to address the assistance to local governments. And the committee heard last meeting about the need of situations to get assistance sooner. With that in mind, before going into the bill, I just wanted to remind the committee of DEQ's testimony last month regarding the statute that currently is in existence, which is Wyoming Statute 3512-113E. And that provision allows local governments to seek a bond, and that's currently in existence. Under that statute, a permit can be conditioned upon the applicant furnishing a bond so that the local government can recover expenditures to prepare for impacts that might be caused by the facility. The impact type doesn't matter. It could be a mitigated or unmitigated impact. And in that testimony that we gave last in April, we recommended one change to 113E, and that was to delete the director and make it the council determining the bond. Okay, so now turning to
Ms. Bear, what was that statute that where municipalities can get a bond that you referenced there?
That was 3512 113E.
Okay, thank you.
And we had that in the slides from last meeting. Turning to the draft bill, and this is 27 LSO 0021 version 4. We have some minor changes, and I think it was mentioned that there might be there's some existing language that is on pages 2, 3, and throughout this bill. On page 2, line 21, where it talks about counties, cities, and towns, we recommend changing that to local government. And so these changes to some of the existing language and to the new languages to reflect local governments instead of counties, cities, and towns. Other places use the word counties. Local governments is more inclusive. It includes some of the joint power boards, et cetera. So on the first change of that nature is on page 2, line 21, where it says counties, cities, and towns. We'd recommend changing that to local governments. On page 3, line 8, where it's the word counties, we'd recommend changing that to local governments. On page 3, line it starts on 12 and then goes to 13. It says counties, cities, and towns. Again, recommending change to local governments. And then on page 4, line 10, and this is in the new language where it says to an affected county, city, or town, we recommend to an affected local government. And then on page 7, line 19, where it's got each county, city, and town, again, local government. And, oh, I missed one. Yep. Page 6, line 7, where it says cities and towns. Excuse me, it says distribute to the county and to the cities and towns, and it would just say distribute to the local governments. So those are all kind of cleanup changes to get some consistency through the statute.
Mr. Fuller, you got all that?
And now turning to the new language on page 4. Let's see, on lines, and this would be on lines 5 through 14. And having already made that one change in terms of local government, we would say no other changes to that section. We don't have any recommended changes there. Starting on, let's see, line 14 to 21, we have one suggested correction on line 17 where it talks about permit applicant to submit the bond. We'd recommend changing that to permittee. And then this section on kind of 14 to 21 is really focused on the idea of what risk is there in terms of who who is kind of on the hook and in terms of the risk of the project not getting built. For an idea of what that risk might look like, there's been 81 permits issued since 1976 by the Industrial Siting Council. 11 of those projects did not go forward. And then as proposed, here in these lines 14 through 21, the state would front the impact assistance prepayment, and then the permittee would furnish the bond to assure repayment. Under that model, the risk is lower to the state with respect to repayment, but if the cost is substantial, then there's a risk that the projects might not come into the state. So that's kind of one of the risks that this proposed language is trying to manage. For example, if you have a $10 million impact assistance award to a local government, then using that proposed 20% maximum that they could get in terms of prepayment on that impact assistance, that would be $2 million would be what that local government might be seeking as prepayment. The cost of a bond, assuming a bond costs about 10% of that $2 million, that would be about $200,000 for that one impact assistance. And those impact assistance awards go through the Industrial Siting Council process. So there could be more than one applicant on any given project that seeks a prepayment assistance award. That was just an example for one.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Kocha.
the 20%, is that, where did we come up with that number? Is that a number we've all agreed to, or it seems like some of the local government you're talking about might need more than that up front. And the other question I have, what happens if that does not go through? Does that local government have to pay that back?
Mr. Chairman, the 20% DQ, just toss that out there at the April meeting, just in terms of discussion. It was not a, it's up to the committee. We didn't have a basis for saying, hey, 20% or 10% or 50% on that. So we don't have a basis for the 20%. It was a number that we put in there for discussion purposes. And then to your second part of your question on who kind of is on the hook. So for this particular, the permittee would be required to post the bond for that prepayment. The prepayment would be coming, how this bill is currently written, that prepayment would be coming out of the sales and use tax piece. So the state would be on the hook and be covered for that prepayment to pay back that what is taken out of the sales and use tax early for that prepayment. Under that previous example where it was the statute as it currently exists in 113E, that has a, there where it's the local government would be in terms of the bonding. So there's different models that can go from prepayment is paid, put up front, and the state just carries the risk, to a bonding which protects the state in this current bill draft, or you could have somebody else bear that risk, depending on how it's structured.
Follow up?
No, thanks.
All right. Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here. Looking under Romanet E in that statute, it says a permit may be issued or conditioned upon the applicant furnishing a bond to the division in an amount determined by the director. So with that in mind, my first question is, what is the criteria? What is the criteria used to determine what that amount is, number one? And then it further goes on to stay in Romanet E that the permit holder is not liable under the bond if the holder is prevented from completing the facility proposed by circumstances beyond his control. Can you tell me what circumstances beyond their control is? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. So I can answer part of your question. Part of it I can't answer because to our knowledge, nobody has ever exercised this provision. So we haven't gone through the entire process yet. But to your point about some of the criteria, that's driving our recommendation to change it from director to council, because the council is going through that permitting process and hearing some of the facts that they can base their decision on for this. So that's, part of it is we haven't gone through this process before with a bond.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm looking at page 4 in that new language. If we were to delete the bonding language in this bill, then pretty much this bill would just make the state at risk if we deleted that bonding language. The state would then be on the hook if the project lost, if we deleted that language. That's my understanding. I just want your thoughts on that. And wanted to see if we would need to have any other additional language in there if we deleted the bonding language to make conforming changes to make it work for you guys.
Ms. Fair?
Mr. Chairman, you're correct. Deleting the bond is just to make that prepayment that comes out of the sales and use tax to protect that payment going back in if the project does not go forward.
Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in essence, that prepayment that if we didn't have a bond, that prepayment that the state gave for a fire truck, if that project fell through, in essence, the state would just be buying that local government their fire truck at the end of the day. And there wouldn't be any sort of recapture of that contemplated or anything like that, is my understanding.
Deputy Director?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Representative Knapp, Chairman Knapp, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. So this is a pretty significant change to our industrial siting. And in an application, as the cities, towns, and counties come up with their impacts, those are itemized pretty closely, aren't they? For instance, fire trucks, or it's not a general impact. It's typically something very concrete. And so as we look at this as maybe being the exception rather than the rule, the up to 20% is important, and the bonding is important in this. Just talk to me a little bit about how you see this as an impact. Is it meant to be an exception rather than the rule? And is it geared towards those itemized items in an impact review?
Deputy Director Merritt?
So currently there does not exist, other than the statutory provision of 113E. That's the only, I'll call it existing bonding requirement that exists. And there's not a mechanism for prepayment until the start of construction. And I'll just turn to Ms. Staben to see if there's anything additional to add on that.
Ms. Staben?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I understand this proposed rule as written, it would be for a prepayment up to 20% of some particular award to a local government. The determination of the prepayment as written, and if you consider how the Industrial Siting Act works, as well as in with the sales use, what I imagine is that the Industrial Siting Council, when it comes to this prepayment award, such an award would be based on the specific facts at the hearing, such as every other award that the council determines. Currently in industrial siting, the council has changed how they handle the requests brought forth by local governments, in that the council does require an itemized list, specifically the dollar amount and what those dollars would be applied to. As this is written, I imagine that an argument would have to be made to the council for the necessity of a prepayment. So in my mind, I imagine the council would hear evidence, and so this prepayment would probably seem more reasonable. As you know, the council has to make all their decisions based on preponderance of the evidence, meaning a reasonable decision. And so I imagine a prepayment would be reasonable for larger ticket items, fire trucks, ambulances, items that need to have that need to be purchased, negotiated prior to construction, because it takes 2 to 3 years to get them. I imagine I would find it hard for the council, or I would be surprised if they did this prepayment for something like additional dispatch hours, additional overtime hours, which is part of a usual industrial siting request for impact assistance. So in my mind, this may be provided as an option should the evidence presented at a permit hearing justify a request for a prepayment of some impact assistance. I imagine that prepayment then would be subtracted from the overall award given to that local government for their other itemized requests. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, yes, very well. Thank you, Ms. Steben. And so from what I get from your testimony then is 20% advance payment will be an exception to the norm and not something that just happens because, you know, counties, the local governments, they would love to get that money as soon as possible. But you're thinking this is going to be an exception if there are large ticket items that need longer lead times, then that would be awarded on an exception basis rather than as a normal course of business. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, sure, sir, instead of saying an exception, I would say that this award would have to be justified by the facts presented to the council. So I don't imagine an argument for that would justify prepayment for additional dispatch hours when there is an increase in the population of the town due to the workforce. So instead of characterizing it as an exception, I would characterize it as an additional tool to meet the needs of a local government based on the facts presented at that time.
And Ms. Steben, if the local government did not have specific items that they needed to purchase, do you envision giving the full 20% or just mostly it'll be less than that depending on what those items are?
Chairman, sir, I imagine, I don't mean to repeat myself, it would be very factually dependent, and whether it's up to that 20% or less, I think it would definitely, local governments would have to put on a justification for that 20% dollar amount, whatever that may be. Or whatever percentage that goes forward through this committee. But it would still be based on the facts. I wish I could be a bit more clear on that, but it's literally the facts and what they asked for. The council at this point in time is requiring a specific dollar amount, specifically what it's used for, proof of that dollar amount, proof of what you need. And they even now are further exploring proof that it's an unmitigated impact. It's very organized. It's on a spreadsheet put up at the hearing. So a local government would have to put on proof that, yes, we need 20% of the dollar amount we're requesting, we need specifically because, and be able to articulate why they need those funds before the start of construction.
Okay. Representative Lowell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator Saban, thanks for that explanation. As I heard you talk, I began to wonder if we don't need additional language in here concerning the prepayment and what you just described. 2 years ago, we had this discussion, as you probably will recall. And again, I learned a lot in that about the Industrial Siting Commission, how it works, which was beneficial for sure. But I think we did have some additional language that we had included in the approach we took that kind of clarified some of what you're saying about how this interacts with the entire process and the authority of the commission to make these determinations over and above what's normally being asked for in terms of prepayment. What would you be looking for? And would that be helpful here to make sure that that's clear how it works within the process, the existing process?
Mr. Chairman, I think as this is currently proposed, it does work within the current process. I think the determination to be made is, number one, an authorization for the council to authorize a prepayment of some variety. And of course, sidelines for what would be a justification for a prepayment. Right now, by statute, they cannot make a prepayment. They can only make payments at the start of construction. The second question then is if, and it's really a question of which model, and that is, the second question is, what kind of assurance should go along with a prepayment should a project not be built or not go forward? Should that assurance on a prepayment, should that go forward as a bond at the cost to industry? For that industry would have to factor in their decisions of bringing business to Wyoming. Or, as Representative Lawley discussed previously, back in 2025 with a proposed bill 25 LSO 0070 version 4, where the idea there was that prepayment would be paid out of the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account. Then, once construction started, the impact assistance payments that would have been distributed on a regular schedule would go to repayment to the state for those prepaid funds. So the first issue at hand, again, is giving the council authority to distribute impact assistance funds before construction. And then the second issue would be what type of assurance on those prepayments would be appropriate should a project not go forward.
Thank you.
Nope.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Co-Chair Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, on page 2, where we're changing that to local government, one of the complaints I've heard on this process is the money goes to the county and then the local entity or local government doesn't get it right away. Would we have a problem if we change that to distribute it to the local government instead of to the county and have them do it?
Mr. Chairman, the suggestions today where we have asked for specific points within the statute to change words county, city, and towns to local government. Those specific phrases have been individually selected out of this statute because the definition of local governments back in the Industrial Siting Act includes counties, cities, towns, and the entities within a county that's organized under like special districts and that sort of thing. So the requests we've made are under, I've forgotten what they're called, Nancy. Organized districts.
Joint powers.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Joint powers boards. Okay. So the language, the instances that we've asked today for terms like county, cities, and towns to be called local governments. All that is doing is it is aligning the definition of local governments that is in the Industrial Siting Act, which would include entities organized under the Joint Powers Act. It is not changing any of the responsibilities. It's just fixing the words in the statute to give the authority for counties when they make that distribution to cities and towns to also clearly make that distribution to entities organized under the Joint Powers Act. So it's just a cleanup for that. The changes that we've requested do not change the responsibility Currently in our sales tax statute, that says the Department of Revenue gives the money to counties, counties then distribute it to local governments. That would be a separate issue that would need to be addressed directly. But the request we're making today does not impact that in any way, the
Yep.
current structure.
Mr. Chairman, I understand that. And the second part of my question was, what if we did change that? Do you see any problem with going directly to local governments instead of going to the county?
So, and I'll just, if I may, Mr. Chairman, tackle that. I think that goes to what Mr. Fuller was saying in terms of looking at the statutory provisions for that distribution. There may be other statutory provisions outside of this.
Mr. Fuller.
And Mr. Chairman, Chairman Anderson, that may be a question because the Department of Revenue is the department, the agency that makes those payments. That might be a question better directed to them.
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'll go to Representative Knapp.
Director Staben, you keep saying that we've got to release that the council needs authority. But what I want to know is, what is the criteria? If we give the authority and everything, I'm still just absolutely lost on what the criteria would be if we give you authority to establish prepayment that covers taxpayer expenses and the ability to claw that money back. If a project starts and we're not liable for this until they start that project. Well, okay, a fire truck's got to be ordered 5 years in advance. So the taxpayers are taking on that responsibility to do that before the project starts. So if something happens, what ability does the taxpayer, what ability does the state have to claw back that money that's been expended? And then let's say they decide they want to postpone a project. What is the process to where we can claw back that money that's already been expended?
Mr. Chairman, your mechanism to claw back the money would be some type of a bond. Or some other function to put money back into the fund. So, but it wouldn't, yes, I'm gonna stop.
Well, pardon me, Mr. Chairman, you're right on point with where I am, but I don't know how to say it. There's got to be some sort of criteria. There's got to be some mechanism in there that establishes if this is the occurrence, we can cover that bonding can be used for stuff like that. Because it's wrong for Wyoming taxpayers to be spending money, real taxpayer money on a hypothetical project. And if for some reason that project decides, well, we're going to have to postpone, we're going to have to idle this down, the taxpayer is still on the hook for that money that has been spent. So there has got to be some sort of mechanism or process to where we can recover some of that when these projects do not proceed at the pace that they want to.
Representative Campbell, I think that's the reason for the bond is so the business partner.
I understand.
Wait, it's have skin in the game.
I understand that is the reason for it, but how does the process work? Because I just don't see that there is a process in place to make it actually make the mechanism go.
Ms. Bear?
Mr. Chairman, that would, on the new language that's in the bill, it would authorize that prepayment and the bonding. We do have, in terms of that mechanism, we do have a question that the committee may want to address in this bill, is how long should the permittee be required to hold the bond? And I think that goes to part of what you're saying, Mr. Campbell, is that is it until the commencement of construction, the completion of construction? And I think that's reflected somewhat in the staff comment on that definition of construction. So you can have a project that never starts. You can have a project that starts construction and then stops at some period in the process or goes all the way through construction. And that's that balancing of risk that the committee is considering. And so if you want to be fully covered, then that would be the entire period. If you want to have full exposure, that would be no bond and nothing at the beginning. And it's somewhere in that range is the percentage and the time frame for coverage of, under this process as proposed.
Okay. Representative Tarver, hello down there.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Ladies, thank you. Just a quick question on the 20%. Do we even need to put the 20% in there? Or can it be a case by case issuance and we determine what that is depending on the project? Do we even need to put 20% in this bill?
Mr. Chairman, that's up to the discretion of the committee. The more clarity that's given, that's what the council will operate under. So if you want to have, they can do it up to 100% or some measure. It's probably good to give the council clarity so they know as they move forward what the legislature would like them to do.
All right, Representative Knapp, you've been very patient up there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just along those lines of being very clear about our intent, on page 4 in the language, starting off on line 5, the council may include, would you see an advantage to putting justifiable itemized prepayments to make clear that it is the intent is to look at items that need to be prepaid in advance, such as a fire truck, and have those be justified and itemized. Only because giving the 20%, I would hate to see this misinterpreted at some point by council to justifiably give a 20% prepayment without it being justified and itemized.
Ms. David?
Mr. Chairman, I am aware that there is a clause within the statute that states the council has to give the reasons for their decision and they have to make a decision based on preponderance of the evidence. It will take me a moment to find that. But there is a section in there that describes how the council must justify and explain their decisions, and they typically do that in the actual permit order. So it might be a matter of just tweaking a sentence in that section.
Okay, thank you. Follow-up, Representative? Yeah. Oh, Senator Ruffus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Staben, as this is structured right now, it seems like it might be compulsory as opposed to cooperative for an entity that is working on a project that requires industrial siting to end up paying for a bond. And I want to see if that's correct as structured, and maybe there's a way to work on that. But what I see is an applicant comes along and says, we want this project to go through the industrial siting process. We'll say that there's $10 million of approved funding back to the communities. As per your example, $2 million of that ends up being approved for immediate funding. Then that entity appears to be on the hook regardless. They didn't have any say in any of this process so far to say, you know what, we don't want to see that additional cost. It then becomes an obligation, an additional cost associated with industrial siting. Is that a fair assessment of how this is, that entity, that business would have no say in the amount of money that they would be obligated to pay as a result of a community deciding that it wants prepayment?
Mr. Chairman, as written, it is correct that should the prepayment be awarded, then yes, the bond would be compulsory to go with that. However, the decision to make that prepayment, as well as the dollar amount of that prepayment, would be based on the facts presented at the permit hearing. At the hearing itself, that would be the opportunity for the applicant in the second half of the hearing to present their own case, to present their own arguments for or against the prepayment.
Mr. Chairman, but I think, I just want to make sure that as structured, it becomes an unanticipated project cost that can't necessarily be predicted. And therein lies my concern, and I want to see if it is structured that way. And it sounds like that is the case.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that would be.
Thank you.
Mr. Fuller has a comment.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Knapp, I just wanted to follow up kind of on your question and the applicable language. If you look on the bill draft, page 3, line 18, requires the council to state in its order the total dollar amount of the impact assistance payment and then specific findings detailing the basis for that determination. And then on page 4, line 2, the sentence right before the new language, the impact assistance payment is distributed by the Department of Revenue on a schedule determined by the council based on evidence that's provided by the hearing. So I think that may get to part of your question, and just wanted to point that out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Representative Knapp, any follow-up to that?
Yeah, I think that language may help. I just think it's important to have the intent of the new language focused on what it is, which is itemized justifications.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Co-Chair Anderson.
Chairman, Senator Roth's question brings up another issue here that the environmental or the Industrial Siting Council probably has to deal with, because in some cases, the company wants to do in kind rather than straight money out. So what do we do in that case where there's a $10 million assistance, but they're going to furnish 5 million of that in kind?
Mr. Chairman, typically any agreement that a local government has made with the applicant is negotiated typically before outside of the industrial siting permit proceedings. Then during proceedings is when the applicant or the local government will disclose what agreements they've made outside of the process and then demonstrate what additional need in the form of impact assistance would be required. So that's the current process. I don't foresee the prepayment changing that current process.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This discussion's revolved around a lot about prepayments. So, and I think our biggest concern in this case is timely reimbursement of already expended funds. So if I could see setting a limit on the 20% if it's a prepayment and nothing has been expended. But I would think that in this particular case, that you have the reimbursement amount already to go. I would think maybe full reimbursement would be more appropriate in some cases. If it's identified legitimate expense in advance of the construction of this project. So is that how normally your expenses are reimbursed now by already just basically reimbursement method? You're not prepaying under normal circumstances, are you, for impact payments, or are you?
Mr. Chairman, the way the process currently works is that industrial siting funds are only distributed once construction begins. If a local government spends any costs, purchases something before the start of construction, then it is the distribution of that impact assistance, which would then, pay back that initial front of cost. When we're talking about the prepayment, the way I'm understanding the prepayment is that before construction, so 45 days after a permit's issued, that front cost that has been awarded by the council would go straight to the local government. Then, let's say 6 months later, a year later, when the project starts, the impact assistance for other items that were awarded would be distributed, and minus whatever that front payment was for. So for example, if you were to be, I have to use very basic numbers, but if you were to be local governments awarded 100,000 for a fire truck, and 20% of that is given as a prepayment. Then 45 days after the permit's issued, 20% of that 100,000 would be given to the local government for the fire truck. The remaining balance of that fronted cost for the fire truck would then come in the form of impact assistance payments once the project started construction. That is how we are reading the proposed language.
Any other questions? Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So then what language would we need to have to make it to where it's 20% of the entire impact amount awarded for all the local governments? Because I think that like if one town has a fire truck, but the other town has a road that they don't really need to build yet, I think overall the fire truck is important to get on and get that whole dollar amount up front. So how do we make sure that that happens in that scenario?
Ms. Staben?
And
Ms.
Mr.
Ba-
Chairman,
Deputy.
under that scenario, this is captured in the proposed language because each applicant would have to make that demonstration that Dr. Staben mentioned for their proposal. So they each get an impact assistance amount, so they'd have to put on that case.
All right. Seeing no further questions, thank you, Dr. Staben and Deputy Director Bear. Commissioner North. I failed to recognize that we have another legislator in the room. Representative Lean, thank you for being here. We'll hear from you next.
I'm Dave North. I'm a commissioner here in Turner County, and I'm one of the ones that requested that this be on the interim topic. And there've been a lot of questions today, and I'll see if I can present. Go ahead.
Can you scoot that a little bit closer?
It's on. Close enough. We'll try again. Okay, now can you hear me? Okay, sorry about that. We have the same problem at our courthouse when we have meetings too. So I'm Commissioner North. I'm one of the Turner County Commissioners, and just for the record, I am one of the ones that presented this as being an interim topic because of so many things have changed over the last several years, basically since COVID, that affect how the industrial siting fundings go out and everything else. Part of that is the long lead time, as the chairman presented, on certain items like fire trucks, ambulances. There's other things out there. Even road construction anymore, a lot of that stuff, you can't just get it done in 6 months. You have to plan it sometimes 3 and 4 years out in advance. So to answer some of the questions, I don't think 20% is adequate. On some projects, I think it's more than adequate on other projects. So I would recommend that number be either raised or changed so that it's only representative on long lead time items. That's the only thing we're talking about. We're talking about fire trucks or things that they have to order a long time out in advance and make sure they have them when the project starts. We're not asking for any additional funding from the companies. It's only going to be the funding that the bond would basically be reduced as the impact taxes come in. So we're not asking for anything additional from the companies at this point in time. But it is important that the municipalities, the special districts, the counties, and everybody else, I mean, I know that every one of you, after listening to the legislation last year and everything that you guys went through, funding is an issue across the board. Our revenue bases this year, the proposed revenue base, the only thing that went up this last year is gambling revenue. Everything else was down, pretty much across the board. So it was just gambling revenues, the only thing that came up. So, you know, everybody is feeling this right now. It's not just one group. It's not the big counties. It's not the small counties. It's all the way across the state. And so that's what's important, is to make sure that we have what we need, and as far as all the municipalities, the counties, the special districts, or anybody else. And the impact assistance is very specific. I've gone through industrial siting multiple times, and you have to be very specific as far as what you're asking for. Dispatch, other items that aren't inventoriable or long-term, things that that we're not asking for stuff that you can go down to the store and pick up today. You know, if you can go to the car lot and pick up a new truck, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about things that are long-term, that have that impact and directly affect the groups that actually requested this. So if you're going to have additional sheriff patrols and things like that, that doesn't need to be covered until the project starts, until that revenue comes in. So that's not part of what we're asking for. All of that is part of the impact assistance, but that's not everything that needs to be covered under this. So I just wanted to make sure that that was, you know, that was kind of covered and laid out.
Question.
Yes.
Question. Yes. Commissioner, what do you think we should we change that to 50%, not exceed 50%? Or how do you think we ought to change that so it works for the local governments?
Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, my personal feeling is 50% is adequate, because generally speaking, most of the additional assistance, impact assistance, is related to other things like jails, additional patrols, other things that are associated with it. Now, I do believe that the Industrial Siting Committee should have that option, that if there's something over and above, you know, that it's a project that actually takes something like an additional water line or something like that, that ought to be taken into consideration. You know, but generally speaking, the impact assistance is not the full, you know, the stuff that has to be covered is not the stuff that's necessarily represented in the entire grant or the entire impact assistance. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for Commissioner North?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other co-
So I understand that the request really, or the need, is limited to long lead time items based on your testimony, and an example being a fire truck. What other examples have you experienced that are long lead time items, or how would you define long lead time items?
You have to order an ambulance. Those have a long lead time. There's a lot of the specialty, and it's generally related to EMS equipment. But there may be something else that you have to, I mean, I quit trying to have a crystal ball, because it seems like every time you think that you know all the answers, somebody throws a question out there that nobody anticipated. So those items I know specifically. Those are all brought up, and they all have to be itemized right now when you have to bring them before the industrial siting. So those are the main things, are those long lead times, like ambulances, trucks, especially specialized equipment. So, you know, it may be some other type of specialized equipment that has to be taken into consideration too.
Follow up, Senator? So Commissioner, let me give you an example and see what your thoughts are. I have a community that has a big workforce coming in for a nuclear construction, worried about being able to flush their toilets with all this influx of people. Would that be a long lead time item where you actually upgrade a wastewater treatment plant, anticipating a big project like that? You know, we talked about fire trucks, but what about infrastructure?
I think infrastructure is part of it. If it's going to be something that's big like that, where you are directly affected and that has to be upgraded, I do think that that should be something that's a long lead time. You can't go in there and put water lines and sewer lines in a short amount of time. That takes a long time to do that. And yeah, there's other avenues that you can reach out for. There's other grants that you can reach out for. But that I do think that if it's directly affecting that community, and that's something that has to be associated with that project, that should be covered.
Okay, let me extend that a little bit. What about housing now? Is that a long lead time project?
I think we're delving into a totally different subject when you start talking about housing.
Okay.
You guys all know about that. There's been a lot of bills and a lot of stuff that's been brought up on that. I think housing is something that, as far as infrastructure, that's one thing. But as far as housing goes, I think that's a totally different item. If you have something and a lot of that stuff is going to be taken care of as the project moves forward.
Okay.
And I think the private sector will step up in those situations.
Where the sideboards were on this.
Yeah,
Thank you. Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner. The other thing about that would get scrapped would be all the planning you had to do in anticipation of a new site coming in. So especially in this case where they're going to delay the project 2-3 years before they maybe start construction. So anything that you plan to do will have to be replanned completely again and reevaluated and estimated again. And that comes with an expense. So you've already done it once and you haven't gotten paid back for it.
And just out of personal experience, sometimes 6, sometimes 9 years down the road from when the project was initiated, all the costs are associated go up and change. And I know there's a process that can, right now that can be done, but those things all cost a lot more. It's like if you order a fire truck today, the cost is generally going to be between 1.5% and 2%, 2 times what that estimation is on today's market by the time you may get it delivered. And you guys know how that goes. Everything across the board. If you go out and you have a estimate on how much it's going to cost to build a house, but you have it delayed and you can't get it started for a year, your costs are going to go up dramatically on that. And that's the way it is on every project out there. I haven't seen anything personally where the prices actually come down. Everything goes up. And having that availability and knowing that is going to be covered when it comes in, and it may not be 100% covered, but at least you know that you're not going to have to expend, especially these special districts. You're not going to have to expend the full amount yourself, and you can look for other options. That's really what this comes down to, is making sure that that's all covered and taken care of. And part of the problem I have with the state covering, the bond on the back side of it, is that's still taxpayer money. The state is still, that money can be used for a lot of things. And if a company can't come in and do something, I understand that there are extenuating circumstances from time to time. But what I'm afraid of right now, and this has happened, and I've seen this happen, is speculative companies come in, they walk all the way through the industrial siting process just so they can turn around and sell that project to somebody else. This would help make them have skin in the game, basically, so that they aren't going to do that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
Senator.
can you tell me a specific example of when that happened? Because it's not secret, so it's public information, so I don't know why we're being protected.
we
about the
had
detail.
an example here was when Dino Solar first came in. They produced a plan. They went through industrial siting. And this is a project, a solar project out by Bar None. They turned around and sold that project to NextEra because they weren't able to complete it. That's one right here in town, but there are others around the state that has happened.
Follow up, Mr.
Yes.
And why would the county object to that? I mean, if that particular enterprise was not going to be successful and needed to sell that asset to someone else to continue with the project, why is that a bad thing?
Maybe I misrepresented that. I'm not saying that I have a problem with them selling that asset. What I'm saying is that there needs to be some skin in the game when they're doing that, so that when all that stuff goes through the industrial siting, that they're still covered for all those itemized items that were brought up. Because when you sell a project, there's no guarantee that the company that buys it is going to follow through and do exactly the same thing that you did the first time around when you went through the industrial siting. When they sell that project, the industrial siting has already been completed. And everything has to be changed and adjusted according to that. They don't go back through the industrial siting process again when they do that. That's what I was kind of alluding to.
Senator Ruffus.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I share Senator Nethercott's concerns, though. As far as skin in the game, it's my understanding, and I think it varies from project to project, but I don't think anyone gets through industrial siting for less than $1 million. And we're the only state that really has industrial siting. Typically, the companies negotiate with the local communities to figure out who's going to pay for certain costs associated with the project. So my concern with industrial siting for as long as I've been on this committee is that we've created a unique barrier that costs millions of dollars to achieve. And you know, trying to recruit businesses here. So the idea of putting a bond on that and saying they don't have skin in the game, in the view that I have, is the only entity that has skin in the game through industrial siting really is the entity that's paying for the industrial siting at that point in time. The cost to the state is low through the beginning of the industrial siting process. Now, once you start building something, local communities in the state start shifting and taking on some responsibility. So I guess I'm not understanding how we're worried about the skin in the game aspect, where up through the issuance of the permit, all of the risk is with the business. Well, apparently there's some disagreement down there, but I'm curious to hear your response. Heck, I'm curious to hear the good representative's response. It seems that there's a lot of expense getting to the end of the industrial siting process, and there's no possibility of revenue until you're done with it. So how are they failing to have skin in the game?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, what I'm getting at is, yeah, there is a cost associated with it, but it's just like if you go out and this is a very simplistic view, but if you go out and you want to build a house and you want that house to be built with very specialized equipment or something else, you have to put out a bond with that contract. You have to pay a percentage down. He turns around and he gets permits. He pulls those permits. Then suddenly you decide that, okay, I'm not going to be able to do this because funding issues, tax revenues, different changes came down the road. You don't get that money back. Those permit fees have already been spent. That money that you put into that contractor to do that work to start with as a deposit so that he's ready when the day comes, you don't get that money back either. That's part of the contract. That's kind of where I'm alluding to. And like I said, that's a very simplistic approach to it, but that's the way the private sector works a lot of times. I hope that answers your question a little better.
Okay, let's move along here. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
We have a legislator now. Representative Lean, thank you for being here.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, thank you for having me today. Good morning, members of the committee. Wyoming's strength lies in our responsible resource development and our commitment to safety and well-being of our citizens. Large industrial projects bring tremendous economic opportunity, but they also create real, immediate impacts on our roads, schools, housing, emergency services, and local infrastructure. When these projects move forward, our communities, especially our small towns and rural counties, must be protected, and that is why this legislation is necessary. This bill is not a new tax, and I want to make sure that we're stressing that these impact funds are already being assessed. We're just asking for them to come forward at the beginning instead of during and the end. It does not raise taxes to do business in Wyoming, and it protects our citizens. It simply ensures that a fair share of the existing sales and use tax revenue generated by these very large projects is returned to the communities bearing the burden of their construction. Wyoming already maintains one of the most business-friendly tax environments in the nation. We have no state income tax, no corporate income tax, no manufacturing taxes, low property taxes, and some of the lowest severance tax burdens for new projects compared to other energy-producing states. These policies have consistently made Wyoming a top destination for responsible investment. However, business-friendly does not mean communities should be left unprotected. When multi-hundreds of millions of dollar facilities are being constructed, local governments suddenly face spikes in demand for their services long before the full economic benefits show up. Without adequate upfront resources, our citizens suffer things like overcrowded schools, strained emergency response, deteriorating roads, increased pressure on housing, infrastructure. These are not theoretical. We've seen these impacts in the Powder River Basin, Southeast Wyoming, and Natrona County. To truly safeguard Wyoming citizens, we must strengthen this draft, and I respectfully ask the committee to adopt some amendments to make the upfront impact assistance payments mandatory, that there be a forfeiture of the payment if the project is not brought to fruition, and that no permit be issued by the Industrial Siting Council if the payment for the bond is not made within 45 days. The upfront payment ensures accountability. If the project does not proceed responsibly, the bond is available to mitigate harm. In Wyoming, we make a promise, we keep it. We finish what we start, we are tough but fair, and we know where to draw the line. We must draw that line now to protect our communities from these large industrial impacts. Rather than leaving prepayment as optional and capped at 20% for the Industrial Siting Council, I'm asking that we require 100% of the bond to be upfront. This provides immediate financial assurance to our counties, cities, and towns. It protects our citizens from bearing the risk of the projects that are being delayed or scaled back or canceled after impacts have already begun. There is a chance that we stand to delay other economic projects if the impacts are not mitigated on some of our roadways. The citizen protection, it aligns with Wyoming's pro-business philosophy and is putting first the safety of our people. Strong communities bring forth strong economic growth for projects that are possible. The impact monies are to mitigate community harms and to remain viable for the next project to come here and not cause us to stagnate our economic development. By removing the may and inserting a shall, we allow for equal application of the law, as some projects right now under this draft could be done at 10%, 20%, or no percentage at all. This would give us the opportunity to make sure that every project understands that they are being treated fairly. The mandatory 100% upfront payments are essential to prevent unmitigated harm. It covers all of the local governments and its citizens. It does not put pressure on the industrial siding to decide if the fire truck is more important than the ambulance, or if maybe the cardiac equipment is more necessary to be purchased than maybe a climbing rope that would be needed for some of the wind extractions if you needed to extract somebody from up top. I urge this committee to pass legislation with amendments requiring mandatory upfront impact assistance secured by a bond to let us show the nation that Wyoming protects both opportunity and its citizens. This is a Wyoming government for the people, by the people, and I know that we are responsible with our economic growth in Wyoming too. I'd like to, in your email, I apologize that it's not in PDF format and that it's in a JPEG, but you did receive 3 amendments that are potential from me, and Mr. Fuller does have a copy. Amendment number 1 addresses page 4, mandatory, and removes the shall and inserts removes the may and inserts a shall and puts up to 100% of the total impact assistance, as well as adds a bonding requirement that shall be paid within 45 days. Amendment number 2 asks that there's bond forfeiture or cancellation, or if the project changes the footprint scale. That Dino Solar project that was talked about earlier, they have reduced their footprint scale, and that would change the impact bonding. So this gives us a real world example of what's happening today. Amendment number 2 is just language that would show us that the bond forfeiture would happen if there is a reduction in the footprint of the project or a cancellation of the project. And amendment number 3 is that if they're not to put forward this bond and they don't complete it within 45 days, that there's no permit issued by the industrial siting. We need to make sure that there is always a consequence for the actions if they don't happen within our laws. Just as a policy decision, I put on here amendment number 4 on page 2, line 19, where they were talking about cities, counties, and towns through the DEQ this morning. I would just say the awarded entity. The Industrial Siting Council will already have who is to be awarded how much based on those impacts and the current process that they're already going through. That's how they get to determine who receives how much. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I stand open for any questions.
Thank you, Representative.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. So in your scenario, the entity, the local government would have a bond for 100% of the assistance, and also the permittee that's applying would have a bond for 100% of the amount. Does that seem fair that we'd have 2 bonds for the same amount?
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Co-Chairman, I'm not looking for 2 bonds, just one bond that covers 100% of the impact assistant payment across the top. So rather than taking 20% or 30% and only applying for those long lead time items, we take 100% of the impact bonds, the impact payments upfront in a bond format to make sure that all of the impacts will be mitigated at 100% on the industry and not on the taxpayer dollar.
Follow up?
Oh, no.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I worked on a bill similar to this a few years back, and I keep on sitting here thinking, I feel like we're starting to just do patchwork on this, in this section of statute, and trying to solve this section of statute and the problems that arise for our communities, problems that arise for businesses. And really it's just a burden to business to go through this process. It's an expensive burden, and it's an anti-business friendly burden to even have this in place. So I don't know if my question is did you contemplate potentially just turning back industrial siting to our local governments? Let them be in control of the destiny rather than the state continuing to try to weave through what we have here.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, thank you for the question. First and foremost, I want to say that I am hired by the people of House District 38, and I work for the people of House District 38. One of the very real world implications is that Natrona County Fire has scaled back their operations, and my folks that live very rurally stand to have an increase in their homeowners insurance through their ISO ratings going up because we have browned out one of our fire district fire stations. And that would mean that I have homeowners that can no longer afford home insurance. So I'm here today speaking predominantly on behalf of the people of House District 38 and understanding that the industrial impacts have a real world implication in today's world. The people of Wyoming deserve to be able to stay in their homes when we are bringing in industry to the state of Wyoming. I have no problem with returning the Industrial Siting Council to the local, to the county, or to the city, whichever you would see that to look like. One reason that I know that the Industrial Siting Council was formed was for equal application of the law in the state of Wyoming. But I do see that it is not occurring that way. And so I'm open for many suggestions, all suggestions. And as minerals has not been my committee now or in the past, as I began to become familiar with this statute because of the implications it's having on the folks of House District 38, I recognize that there are some challenges within it. And getting all of the legislators to agree on what those changes look like can sometimes be challenging. And so I'm not working for industry, I'm working for the people of House District 38, and I would support return to local control.
Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Lane, for being here. I would like to address Representative Larson's comment on that as well, because as far as local control, the project that we've been referring to is in House District 58. Jamie has been affected in House District 38 by their fire district. In House District 62, we just had an 8,000 acre fire that burned right through the center of my district. My district, Fire Station 13 in my district, is being affected by this project in House District 58. My people are losing their fire insurance because of the requirements from this project. This directly affects Wyoming people, and it is something that needs to be addressed. So I very much like your idea of the 100% bonding. But my question to you, Representative Lean, is in that statute 35-12-13 Romanet E, in E, the last thing it says is the permit holder is not liable under the bond if the holder is prevented from completing the facility proposed by circumstances beyond their control. I think that that's a huge out for them, because I don't understand what circumstances beyond their control is. You know, is that there was a subsidy change to where now, because of subsidies, it's no longer a viable project, so we're not going to do that. Yet our fire districts are still on the hook for that truck that they ordered 5 years in advance. You know, we've got to find a way to be able to deal with that for the people of Wyoming and for the taxpayer.
Was there a question there?
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead, Senator.
You know, look, I'll ask a question here, but I'm very, very concerned. The takeaway hearing from 3 Natrona County elected officials is that Natrona County is not open for business. That's been the pattern and precedent. I find that very, very concerning that we are blaming the opportunity for economic development or business for every challenge that Natrona County is facing, including a fire truck. It sounds like fire trucks are a very, very hot commodity. So the fact that a community bought one, I suspect could easily be resold. I'm sure that special fire truck isn't so uniquely special that there's not another community in the United States of America that is not interested in acquiring it, or another community in Wyoming that's experiencing all of this growth. So, I mean, I appreciate that. I recognize those concerns. I want to be responsive to local government, make sure those are on its way. But we need to be very mindful of our shared responsibility for a growing economy and supporting a future generation. And I'm not sure that we're thoughtfully thinking about the impact of those comments here today to all of those watching across the state and across the country who are trying to find an opportunity for Wyoming's future. So to that end, Representative Lean, have you talked with any of these industries that are interested in doing business in Natrona County? And if they had 100% requirement prepayment for all of the potential impacts that they may have in a local community, including streets, water lines, fire trucks, police, jails, if they would be able to pay for those costs, and if they would actually be locating in Wyoming or go find another state that is more business friendly, potentially to the south of us.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Nethercott, Natrona County is open for business and industry. We're just asking that the harms not be placed on the taxpayer. We are asking that industry come into Wyoming and that our roadways remain intact, as the taxpayers have been the ones to repair those as they've been harmed. We're asking that the cumulative harms of industry from things such as the Laramie Range Wind Project, the Rail Tie Wind Project, the Chugwater Energy Project, data centers coming in, that these are not isolated events, that these have overlapping impacts, and the impacts are cumulative upon our counties and our special districts. We're asking that industry come to Wyoming and support its benefits to Wyoming citizens and not take away from us. We're showing that our impacts don't stop at our fence lines because of one single project. Our impacts have to do with many projects going at one time, and those impacts becoming a cumulative and a burden on our people. Our people want these jobs to come here. Natrona County is open for business, and we ask that we have the opportunity to receive the mitigation impacts ahead of time instead of behind, and so that we're not putting our local entities at risk. Representative Campbell, to get back to your question, I have never heard that Section E has been utilized, and DEQ verified that earlier today. And so I say, if you want to strike it, bring an amendment to offer to do so.
All right. Any other questions? Representative Lawley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't hear an answer to Senator Nethercott's question. Have you talked to industry about the impact, about the feasibility of getting 100% bond, what that would take, whether it's even feasible for that to work? And ultimately, you're saying, don't come here. So, I mean, have you talked to industry, anyone in industry in Natrona County or that is looking to come to Natrona County, and talk to them, getting the other side of the solution? Because we definitely have a problem here. I worked 2 years ago on this very issue with a different kind of approach, which I honestly think is better for Wyoming, but it addresses the problem. But my point is that you've only talked to one side. And so what are you hearing? Is what I'd like to know from those that would come in, the feasibility of 100% bond for all unmitigated impacts.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, thank you for redirecting me back to that point. No, I don't have an industry here in Wyoming that I have spoken to about this particular bill draft. The industry that I have spoken to that plan to come to Natrona County and beyond Natrona County that have impacts in Natrona County, I have not spoken to about this particular legislation. What I have talked to are things like Prometheus Hyperscale and their community benefit agreements, and what that would mean for Wyoming and what that would mean for Natrona and Converse counties if they are to come here. But they don't go through industrial siting, which brings me back to a local control issue. And how is industrial siting truly helping all of the impacts be mitigated across Wyoming? I think we're under an equal application of law turmoil, and I think we're also under taxpayers taking the burden of industry in the state of Wyoming. Wyoming's economy is built on our roadways, and I recognize that, and we need to make sure that we are making sure those are secure, as all of these projects, things like the Seminole Pump Project, will drastically impact Natrona County as well. But that Carbon County project, no, I haven't spoken to them about this particular bond impact because they would technically be Carbon County, and I don't represent Carbon County. The folks of Wyoming have asked me to speak up for them on behalf of them to be able to stay in their homes while we are bringing industry to the state of Wyoming. And so that's what I'm here to do today, is to help figure out what is the middle ground to still be inviting Wyoming growth and industrial growth so that we have jobs for our future generations, as well as mitigating the harms and impacts to our local governments and special districts. And I'm happy to continue this conversation with you if you're willing to allow me to do so.
Commissioner North, do you have something you wanted to add to this conversation?
I want to address Senator Nethercott's question. Natrona County is open for business. And I am going to tell you right now that the commission, not just me, but the commission as a whole, has been working very diligently with multiple different companies to try to get them to move to Natrona County. I can't help what the public does. I can't have any control over what some of the things that are said on social media or anything else. But I will tell you very clearly, and I want this to be on the record, and that's the reason why I came back up, that we are working with industry. We are working with different groups. We are not anti-development. We are not in our backyard. That's not what we're about. We are supportive of bringing new industry to this county. We are supporting making sure that our kids can stay here and work, and that we actually promote the county as well. So that statement as far as us not being open for business, that's not true. I can't say that every place in this county and, you know, the municipalities, the citizens and everything else all feel the same way. But I will say we are in favor of bringing companies here that are going to benefit the county and benefit the municipalities here. We have a prime example in Evansville. Mesa is in the process of building a huge new facility there. They're here. We have other places. We have a lot of different industry that have come to Natrona County over the last several years that have benefited the county. And so we're not closed for business. We are open for business.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, thank you for that follow-up. I mean, you know, my observation is that Natrona County is in a state of turmoil. And some of the testimony I've heard from the representatives electing the people, you know, elected by the people and speaking as the voice for the people, have clearly communicated that there's a high level of resentment regarding some of that growth. And those businesses there's some kind of, perhaps I would assert a fallacy that those businesses are causing people to lose their homes or not afford their homes. And I think that there needs to be a greater community discussion about what those businesses may or may not bring and what those concerns are, because I think the concern over homeowners insurance is nationwide. And our concern over fire safety and fire suppression and wildfires in this state is certainly not unique or any one business is responsible for. And I just want to put a pin in this for Natrona County to be having conversations about, because I heard the commissioner state that the only source of revenue for the county that's seen an increase is gambling revenue. And so we know that some of those losses are as a result of the property tax reductions. And the People's Initiative will be on the ballot, and how that will impact those local governments, and then how that might be again shifted to these businesses and their ability to relocate here and provide jobs for the children and grandchildren, I think is a huge question if that passes in November. So Natrona County, I am asking the elected officials here in this room and their constituents, both the businesses and people, to have a hard conversation about speaking with maybe a more solidified voice as to the concerns happening here.
Yes, and then we will move along.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Senator, you brought up a very valid point. One of the concerns that I have with this is many of these businesses are presented as if they are a legitimate business, where in actuality, they have no PPA in place, to where I think that's a large part of their bonding issue, is since they don't have any agreements in place. They're moving forward on paper only. Yet the counties are spending real taxpayer money to prepare for this paper project. And many of these projects are just paper projects without a PPA in place. It's non-binding on anything. So we're spending real taxpayer money to prepare for a project that is in theory only. And that, I think, is a large part of the project. Would you not agree, Commissioner? Thank you.
Okay, let's go on to testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Cindy Delancey, and I wasn't really planning on speaking on this topic. I'm with the law firm of Holland and Hart, but I felt compelled to try to add a little balance in this discussion as someone that works every day with these companies that are wanting to come to Wyoming and make significant investments in our present situation as well as our future. I'm very concerned to hear some of the talk, and I appreciate the commissioner coming up and doing a little follow-up about whether Natrona County is open for business or not. But to the senator's point, as a person listening in this audience, and maybe those online listening too all over the world, it sure doesn't sound like it. Just a little bit of background about giving the basis of my comments. In 2007, which is really hard to believe, but I served as a Carbon County attorney. And at that time is really when the wind industry was really coming into fruition, and Carbon County was ground zero in those days for wind energy development. I handled the industrial siting cases on behalf of the county as the elected official. So I just strongly reject this notion of, some of the things to unpack here in this discussion that's been unfolding in front of us is that local government doesn't have a voice, their concerns of the people are not being met. That's just fundamentally false. The industrial siting process has been in place since 1970. It is that we have this process like no one else. No one else in the country does what we do here in Wyoming to make sure to address a lot of the concerns that we've heard. The process works well. The staff, the department, they are diligent in their examination of the projects and whether or not they meet the statutory criteria that has been set by the legislature for these projects to go forward. No other place does it the way that we do in Wyoming. On the front side, bringing the subject matter expertise of 19 plus agencies to bear as these applications are being reviewed. There's millions of dollars that are invested by the company to even get to the place where their application is ready to be, submitted to the division and the staff for review. So just blaming industry for every problem that a community might have just really, I think, sends the wrong signal as we're competing with other states to the south, other states to the west. Like Wyoming, one of my clients kind of says this and it just kind of resonates in my mind, but Wyoming's in a beauty contest. Like we're trying to put our best foot forward to get the type of corporate citizens and partners that we want to come here. And to be doing things and having discussions like we're having today about adding enormous costs and burdens in the process, that really undermines that position that we're trying to signal to the world that we want business in Wyoming. We want industry to come so we can not only continue to sustain the quality of life that we all enjoy as Wyoming residents, not through the taxes that we're paying as citizens, but through the taxes and revenue generated by our industrial partners, to get those companies to want to come. To add additional burdens in the process, additional costs, to be making disparaging comments about, if projects are sold or whatever, that's called the free market. Like there's no room for the government in a two-party contract. People make business decisions and investment decisions all day long. And I assure you, the types of billion-dollar projects that I work on are not taken lightly. Every company that I work with is coming to Wyoming to be the best corporate citizen and the best community neighbor they can be. And if you look around, particularly on our campus down in Laramie, the fruits of that actions speak very loud. And I just really, again, like I said, wanted to bring a little bit of balance here as far as, this notion of, that corporations are not your constituents as well. I mean, they're being taxed, they're paying taxes, they're contributing to impacts, and they want to have open lines of communication. And that's really something else that the division does really well, like really giving due care as how these projects move forward. And I just really caution this committee to think that there's a one-size-fits-all approach. We heard that through testimony, giving the division the discretion to try to work through this, if there's a change perhaps in rule, but to just kind of do a cram down of this one size fits all with enormous costs and burdens. I just really ask this committee to really think long and hard about the long-term implications that it could have, and it was really fun to hear Representative Lean bring up the Code of the West, because that's really something that I think about every day. I try to live my own life in accordance with those principles. And to bring companies here, have the ground shifting under their feet and change midstream in a process doesn't really feel like that fairness that we really pride ourselves on as leaders in this state. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I just, again, really want to bring some balance to the discussion that there's pluses and minuses in every situation, but the companies that are coming and making these huge investments and want to be these long-term partners really do want to leave Wyoming a better place than they found it. Thank you.
Ms. Delaney. Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for the Representative Lean, if I could.
Well,
on her
let's
amendment.
finish this one.
Okay.
Representative Kim.
Thank you for coming up. Would you agree that businesses that don't have an agreement, that, pardon me, do not have a PPA in place deserve to stand up? You know, let's say they've been building on a project for 5 years, but they still don't have a purchaser for whatever whatever widget they're making. Should we jump through the hoops and spend the taxpayer money and do all that for these companies that are paper only, that don't have any agreements in place with anyone for anything?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, no, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with what you said. I do think that whether or not a company has a PPA or other components, those are operational business decisions that should rest with the company, not be subject to the policy of the state of Wyoming. So no, I reject that. Companies should be able to continue to operate their day-to-day operations and continue to spend billions of dollars in our economy. People don't move forward. Boards don't make decisions to allocate capital. People don't finance this notion of some kind of paper company that you're talking about. I'm very unfamiliar with any business that's investing in Wyoming that's a paper company.
Follow up?
Yeah, we have several projects that have no PPAs in place. But what I'm saying is, if a company has got a project and theoretically they're going to start on this date, and then all of a sudden they have to have specific requirements in order for them to do this. So the taxpayer in good faith steps up and says, yep, this is a good deal for the county. This is a good deal for the state. Let's order this equipment. Let's order these things. But then all of a sudden that good partner with no PPA decides, you know what, things have changed, so we're gonna amend things. And in Romanet E, in Statute 13, it says they can wiggle out of it. However, the problem is once the taxpayer has spent money and is on the hook, the taxpayer is spending real tax dollars. That money has already been allocated. And then the project waffles and they don't have a PPA. How does the taxpayer account for spending millions and millions of dollars of taxpayer money on a project that hasn't hired a single person, brought in a single bit of revenue? It's all on paper. How do we account for our taxpayers and say, yes, we spent this money, $2.5 million in advance for this project that is now waffling because this is good business practice? I don't understand that. Please explain.
Ms. Delaney?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Campbell. I can tell this is a very emotional topic for you for some reason. But my response to that, Mr. Chairman, is whether PPA exists at some point in the process, again, that's a business decision that the company makes. And to address, whether or not this is a good deal for the taxpayer or not, the safeguard to that is the very capable staff that you just heard from. These people are not making bad decisions. They are following the law. They're following the process. They're working around the clock to make sure that they can do the level of diligence that the taxpayers in your district deserve, sir. And so my answer is we need to trust the process and trust your very, very capable staff. Nobody's in the business of making bad decisions for Wyoming or driving us in the ditch. We want to make those investments to Senator Nethercott's point so our children have a future here. I want my children to have a future here. And if we continue to have conversations like this, we put that bright future at risk.
Okay, thank you. Let's get back on track here. Representative Riggins, you had a call back for Representative Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Mr.
And then we're
Chairman.
going to move on to public comment.
Thank you, Representative Lean. I just want to, on Amendment 2, we focus on the 100% bond and the payments. Well, if they default, that's when the bond puts get in effect. And so I look at this as more of a problem of payment scheduling and making reimbursement payments rather than focusing on the bond issue. So it wouldn't matter if it's a 20% bond or 100% bond. It's not going to take effect until they they don't make the payments. So I would like to see some improvement in this whole process about when you've made payments and you have reimbursements that are due, even if the construction hasn't started. So what is your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Riggins. I think it's a policy decision and that we're gonna, whatever comes from this committee would then go to the floor of the House, and it would take then the 93 legislators from the state of Wyoming to agree that that is the best policy for Wyoming. And so while I may disagree fundamentally, I do see your point, and I do believe that there could be a middle ground, and I'd be happy to sit and visit with you and see what we could come up with.
Thank you.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to talk about the 45 days and the way that this is structured. Have you looked at timelines of previous projects on how capital raises have worked relative to the industrial siting process? Because the idea as proposed would be all of the money would come and you'd get the bond within 45 days. You've got this incredibly expedited process where state funds are brought in and the company is entirely on the hook. And all they've done is they've gotten a siting permit. And a siting permit, until they have that in place, they can't even get all of their capital. They can't move forward with a lot of the aspects of their project. There's no way they would even begin to start hiring entities to come build until they get their permit. It seems like, and this is probably true of a lot of the conversation that we've just been having, it seems like there's a belief that the moment industrial siting happens, the project is an absolute 100% sure thing, or has to be, that there's a business financial obligation for it to actually take place. I don't know where we got to the point where we believe that an industrial siting permit is a mandate on a business that they will follow through on the rest of what they've described as a business. Can you talk me through the process, the thought process that should lead us to believe then that it effectively is some type of a contract where now we can obligate both the state and the private business to be fully engaged and have all of the unmitigated circumstances met as a result of achieving that permit?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, thank you for the question. And I would ask that the DEQ be able to walk you through that process, as I am not an expert in that area. And as far as the 45 days is concerned, that's open for negotiation. I remember in my testimony before you, I just asked for 45 days as a placeholder. There's not any one thing that says that that bond must be done within that time. Again, it's a policy decision. And so again, open to discussion about what that may look like and what is a reasonable time frame for that bond to be able to come forward. It was just merely a placeholder that was asked for in the legislation to make sure that that conversation occurred.
Mr. Chairman, but follow up, but could you address this concept that we are, and again, we're the only state that has industrial siting, but industrial siting was never intended to be an authoritative contract between a business and the state saying, all right, now that we've given industrial siting, you will create what you have laid out to us, some type of obligation on the business. It's a permit, and permits are drawn all the time and then not followed through, right? You get a permit because you think you're going to do something, and then you may or may not do that thing. The way it's structured under current statute, that's actually part of the reason why it was originally designed, so that you get it out of the revenue as dollars are being spent, a portion of that comes back to the community. That actually made a lot of sense, because if no dollars were being spent on the project, nobody was on the hook for anything, and so it followed the natural business flow of the project. As we start this discussion, we're only starting the discussion because we recognize that it takes some foreplanning, and that we see some communities are getting out ahead of the project because they're anticipating, and that's appropriate for our governments to be trying to get ahead of something. That's appropriate. But if we structure it the way that we're even discussing, where there's now an obligation on the company as a result of a permit right? I've just gotten a permit and now I'm in it. I have to pay $2 million more for a bond because I've gotten a permit to do a project when I don't even know when I'm going to do that project. And we have industrial sited projects that have been industrial sited for a decade that are still planning on moving forward. They're trying to arrange capital. They're trying to arrange that power purchase agreement. They're trying to make all of the arrangements. It really does seem like, despite the best of intentions, and I totally understand the intentions that are being brought here, this new approach would really be detrimental to the standard business flow and just the order of business that has gone with industrial siting over the years. So I'm not looking at as much a breakdown of the exact timeline for industrial siting, which, yes, I can go to Dr. Staben about that. More the philosophy that I want to hear from you on why we would want to change that approach and turn the permit into a contract between the state and the entity, which forces them to follow through on the project.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, just as my good county commissioner mentioned, when you purchase a building permit, there is intent to build or expand or remodel your home or your business or your plot of land in some regard. If you choose not to follow through with that, but you've already purchased the permit, you do lose that money. So that money is already going to remain with the local county. The same would be true of, say, maybe you have a food truck coming through and they want to purchase a health permit to be able to work within your county and here in Natrona County. If they choose not to come forward and make sure that that permit came to use, then they lose that money as well. There is a certain amount of what's good at the state level needs to be good at the local level. And so the philosophy would be that this bond is ensuring that those good industry partners are truly coming forward to work with the people of Wyoming for the people of Wyoming. And so this would give us an understanding that what is happening locally and expected of our taxpayers and our small businesses is also being carried forward on our large industry folks.
Yes.
But it's not the same because you're dealing with the requirement for raising capital in capital markets, and you have to get your permits in order as a business before you can move to the next step. So the idea that you as a business would have every single thing that you need to build the facility, all of the capital lined up, all of your I's dotted, your T's crossed, and then you get your permit. It's just not how business operates. Nobody in the world will be able to do that. So you might not be intending to shut business down in the state of Wyoming, but you cannot raise capital to an unpermitted project. You can raise your initial capital, which is getting you to a permit, but you can rest assured that there is no provider of massive capital out there that is going to say, yeah, no, we're okay. Why don't we'll stake you for $3 billion on this large energy project, and hopefully we get a permit for it. So I understand the analogy you're trying to make, but it just does not seem real world analogous because on one hand, we're talking about a small building project where the money is arranged and you're trying to put together, you're trying to build a home. You've got your financing arranged and there are steps in place. But when we're talking these large projects, there is nothing in common about the financing of those projects and the business operations of those projects with regard to permitting requirements. So how can we expect industry to look at Wyoming and say, yes, we're willing to operate there, if we require a permit that requires that they have all of their capital lined up and that they're ready to build the moment the permit is issued? I don't understand why anyone would come to Wyoming, let alone Natrona County.
Representative?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, once upon a time, the Wyoming found a Wyoming solution to a Wyoming program, and that is the Industrial Siting Act. And we have found as time has moved on and times have evolved that there needs to be a few changes. And so while we're looking at this and we're exploring the impacts to make sure that our Wyoming folks are not pushed out of their local homes or their local land or their counties, we want to make sure that we're adjusting this to get to where business is friendly and the Wyoming taxpayers are feeling heard and taken care of. And so I'm willing to work with you to see what that looks like. And if I'm not mistaken, this is the part of the amendment that I've proposed that makes the bond forfeiture and that you can't get the permit without receiving the portion that you're speaking about. You can't get the permit without receiving the bond up front. And if there's a timeline that we could look at to compare the industry to the financial to the industrial siting to make sure that there is a bond put in place along the way that guarantees that the impact assistance money is 100% taken care of, then we have the opportunity to amend it to that. That's why this bill is before the committee, so that we have a work in progress. And I'm happy to sit and learn what I can learn about the industry and what their financial needs are and what it takes to protect the Wyoming people. And so thank you for the question, and I'd be happy to continue that conversation.
All right, we're going to take a 10-minute break. We'll come back here at 11:20 and finish up with public testimony. Okay, let's open this up to public comment. Anybody that wants to come forward and provide us a public comment on impact assistant. We've had quite a bit of conversation. Hopefully we can narrow this down and get it focused, to get refocused. Who's
no problem, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, Chris Brown representing Powering Up Wyoming. I don't want to repeat too much of what has already been said today, but the industrial siting process in our state is one of the most rigorous in the nation. It takes years and millions of dollars to get through that process for a developer. I think that for us to consider adding an additional bonding requirement to that process does have the potential for a significant chilling effect on investment coming into the state. There is a bonding requirement in the industrial siting process already, and the developer is required to bond 100% of the full reclamation and decommissioning of a project, where that project and that bonding is rechecked every 5 years throughout the course of the project. A second bonding requirement does have the potential to stifle investment in the state. To speak to Representative Campbell's question about power purchase agreements, power purchase agreement discussions are typically not held until permits are obtained and are ready to move forward. That's the reasoning why that those aren't in place. And so, Mr. Chairman, we would stand opposed to this in its current form right now, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Representative Campbell.
Thank you for that. I understand that they need that to get that going, but there are projects that have been approved that are in the weeds for years out. And while I understand what it's meant to do, there are many exceptions to the rule that are not applying, and those are drawing on to tax dollars, where how do we know that they're really going to go forward with any of these projects? If you spend $3 million of taxpayer money on a project in order to meet the obligations for that project requirements, and then the project stalls or whatever as listed in Romanet E, due to circumstances beyond their control, there is no bonding requirements. They're exempt. They're freebie, get out of jail free card. How do we address that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, number one, for a project to go through everything we just talked about, invest the years and the millions of dollars to get to that, that says to me that they're serious about moving the project forward. I can't speak to every nuance of every project that didn't move forward, but I'm unsure of what taxpayer dollars you're specifically referring to, because the authorized taxpayer dollars that the Industrial Siting Council authorizes to be spent on mitigation come from the project itself. Those taxes are generated from the developer and from the project itself.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Project that we're talking about most specifically is Dyna Solar here in Natrona County. They were approved. Everything was going along swimmingly. In order for this solar farm, they had to have high specialty fire trucks that are not currently available anywhere in this area, that are very expensive. Those fire trucks need to be on location the day that they start this project. So those $2.5 million worth of fire trucks were paid for and ordered 5 years in advance when this project was approved. So now the taxpayers are on the hook, and they have options. You know, they can pay a $400,000 restock fee. They can try to find another fire company that'll buy them at a discount, or they can take them on and hope that maybe another similar project will come along down the line. Regardless, this project has decided that it wants to postpone, which under Romanet E, it has that right. Circumstances changed. But the people, the tax dollars have already been spent. The tax money is already gone. Now this project, which was approved and everything, is no longer viable. How does the taxpayer claw back the $2.5 billion for nothing?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Campbell, I understand the sticky situation about having to order equipment years in advance. But if that, pardon me, and just let me finish.
Representative, please.
If that decision was made by the local government to purchase that piece of equipment outside of industrial siting, awarding that specific authorization, then that was a decision made by the local government. I'm not sure about what the specifics are about this project that you're talking about, as I don't know why it was delayed. But at the end of the day, if that mitigation wasn't authorized by the Industrial Siting Council, then that was a decision the local government made to purchase that equipment. And I would assume they were aware of that provision, Provision E, and understood that risk before they made that commitment.
Okay.
Quick follow-up. They did that in good faith with the business. When the business changed their policy, it was the business decision to change that was the factor that caused the effect. So that is on the business. The people in good faith bought that equipment thinking that this project was going forward. So they did that in good faith. Now, in good faith, the people are out that money. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Levin.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jody Levin. I'm here today on behalf of the Wyoming Mining Association and the Trona industry. With me online is Mr. Craig Rude from WeSoda, if he could also be admitted into the room. I'll try to keep my comments brief. I certainly understand the issue that brings us to the table today. The difficulty for the Mining Association and your extractive industries really is this notion of a bond and additional burden on the company. It wasn't too long ago, all of you will remember, the extractive industry was having a very difficult time obtaining financing, not because projects weren't viable or because the world didn't want their project. It was because of political decisions that some entities did not want to invest in certain types of businesses that made it even more complex to go to the market and obtain very complex financing structures for these projects. I think the ultimate question is, what happens if you try to go to the market for an additional bond and you can't obtain it? I think that the project's dead. Again, not because there isn't demand for the project. It could be that the financing arrangement is so complex, the market is nervous about extending additional credit. And so that is the quandary that we find ourselves in. And as written, with the requirement for the additional bond, it is something that the Mining Association will have to oppose. I understand the amendment that Senator Boner has put forward to shift the burden of the bond from industry to the state. That certainly alleviates a portion of the concern, but there is a concern that ultimately that cost gets wrapped back onto the project. So how we feel and or how we address this situation of how to help a community prepare for very specialized, unique circumstances when the funds haven't actually been obligated yet by industrial siting, it is a quandary. I don't mean to downplay that in any sense, but this is a solution that is very difficult for the mining sector to accept.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Rude.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Apologize for not being in there in person, but I am at the WMA convention up in Gillette. My name's Craig Rude. I'm with WeSoda. I've been in the soda ash business for 35 years. I'm a little frustrated with some of the testimony this morning. Feel like we're getting wrapped up in a single issue that maybe could be solved a little bit differently. We started about 4 years ago with a $3 billion greenfield project in Sweetwater County. We have been through the industrial siting process. It's a very long, complex process that is very thorough. I think we wound up filing about 3,000 pages of documents. And after we went through the industrial siting, we were it was about approximately 19 million in assistance funds that were awarded. So if we had to post that $19 million in a 100% bond, that ties up a lot of money. And to Senator Rafa's testimony, not all businesses are flush with cash. It feels like we're talking, everybody has this money laying around to post, and we're continually working on funding for these large projects. And a lot of it depends on permitting, which the BLM permitting right now is very slow because of manpower in their offices. And we have multiple permits that are going slow. Also, you do have changes in the business. During this 4 years, we bought a $1 billion existing soda ash plant in Sweetwater County, which changed our plans drastically. And even though we're moving ahead with the project, it slowed it down. And then add on top of that, the soda ash market crashed in the last year. And if we had 19 million tied up in a bond, that could affect the way we run our current business, which employs 1,000 employees. So, when we were going through the industrial siting process, our county came to us about a road they needed to replace. And we worked with them outside of the industrial siting process to resolve that. So I wonder if when you have these like extremely specialized EMS equipment, could the counties not work with the business outside to secure that funding from the business up front? The business knows it's going to get affected during the industrial siting process if they don't do it, and that solves the problem. It sort of feels like we're doing a shotgun blast for a single problem here. And again, with Ms. Levin's testimony, we would oppose this in its current form, and I would stand for questions.
All right. Any questions for Ms. Levin or Mr. Rude? Senator Representative Lawley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Levin, you brought up something that's been on my mind, which is this issue about bonding itself, the bonding instrument, kind of how it works. The fact that we've been discussing this as if getting a bond is a certainty in a complicated project in particular, but it all is a certainty. And on that lack of certainty, and I think what you mentioned, we ride a whole project. Am I a fair statement of your testimony?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, as this is written and as some of the amendments that were proposed this morning would suggest, if you don't obtain the bond, the project does not move forward. So yes, that's the concern.
Yeah. But also, a follow-up?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The getting of the bond is not itself a certainty. Bonding is a changing market actually right now, I believe. So, but it is not a certainty. We speak of it in the statute, and as it's been spoken of several times today, as if that's as easy as going out and buying some product off a shelf, and it's just there and it's always available. What's your experience with bonding?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Lawley, I have not negotiated any of that for my clients, just to be transparent with the committee. But the concern from the mining sector and certainly from the trona industry is just that you could go to the market and you would not be able to obtain the additional bond. They already have to, as Mr. Rood indicated, they're already having to do bonding. They have to bond with the BLM. They have to bond with the state. My colleague referenced that as well. Going to the market for yet an additional bond, there is not a guarantee that it would be available.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Ann McKinnon. I live here in Casper. The only thing that brought me to comment right now is the thought that, well, maybe we should put this all on local governments, which sounded to me like eliminating the siting administration. And I just want to say that, yes, it's the only state in the country that has it, and it is such a benefit. I actually moved here 45 years ago from Kentucky, which had no such thing. And let me tell you about the disastrous effects that the mining industry in the 1920s, admittedly, had on that state. And one of the reasons I came here was to see if Wyoming could do better with the big construction that was happening in the late 70s and early 80s. And of course, we did. And part of that was the siting administration. So I just wanted to say, oh, when I heard, oh, let's have the local governments do their best when they come in front of the siting administration, but they don't have the capabilities to analyze everything and require the companies. And I think you all know that. I just wanted to say what an important thing siting is. And these details, I can't sort of get into whether the prepayment and the bond is appropriate, but I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McKinnon, for being here. Appreciate you being here. Any questions for Ms. McKinnon? Thank you for your testimony. Mayor?
Committee Chairman, I appreciate your time in the somewhat heated debate. I had some other things I was going to talk on, but maybe I will try to get this back on the rails. Mills cannot continue to support the financial burden of these.
Mayor, would you introduce yourself? Please?
City of Mills, Mayor Juarez, sorry. I do this every time. Mills can't afford this. We can't afford to keep shouldering this burden. We've talked about the county fire, and I can give you guys more details on that too. I also want to say that I don't agree with the bond. I think that would hurt business. If I'm a business owner, I view it that same way. I don't think that's smart. If the state wants to support us financially, I'm all in on that. Absolutely. Let me talk about a couple of projects that we have so I can give better context into what we are currently shouldering financially. Mills went back to the ISC for an additional unmitigated impact award in October of 2024. We were awarded $150,000. We have yet to see it. Dino Solar, we were awarded in 2022 $889,000. We have yet to see it. Dutchman was to start in March of 2026. We were awarded $340,000. We are unaware if the project has started and we have yet to see it. Settler Wind Project, November of 2024, it was permitted. We were awarded $617,000. It has been amended to start in November of 2027. Obviously, we have yet to see those funds. So we are currently shouldering all of those expenses. It's just not feasible. I want to touch on the 20%. That's not going to work either, unfortunately. If an ambulance is $268,000, 20% is roughly $54,000. We have to pay that payment once a year. So being that Dino Solar is out now an additional year, that 20% doesn't help us. We would still have to shoulder the majority of that burden. I do support Senator Boner's amendment. I think it's intelligent. Again, I don't want to prohibit business growth from coming into the community. We want to be open for business. And I don't think the bonding on the company is smart. And you're right, it's not guaranteed. I mean, as a city, we have bonding on our clerks and treasurers, and we still aren't guaranteed when we know that, unfortunately, now that they won't even always pay for those things. So, I just wanted to kind of dial it back into what really I'm here for, which is we can't continue to shoulder the burden of this, and we need help. And, we just ask that you as a committee help us to figure out that solution while being pro-business. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mayor Juarez. Thank you for highlighting those numbers because I think that was lacking in a lot of this discussion. The very specifics of it and how many there were. And so as I've heard all this discussion, I've thought that this is just the schedule of payments and just because a company decides to postpone a little bit, I think there should be some ability to get reimbursement for stuff that's already been paid for. And whatever form that takes, reimbursement because you've already have the receipts for it now. To me, that's a logical approach to correcting, at least helping your situation. Would you agree?
Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to speak in Representative Riggins. I would agree. It's always been about the schedule and the payment structure. It's broken and it doesn't work, and it puts us oftentimes after construction starts. As I spoke on the the Dutchman project was supposed to start in March of 2026, and we have no idea if it is. And when that start date gets flagged, then it is notified to the state. The state then contacts the treasurer's office, I believe. Then they issue a check, and then that goes to the county treasurer here, and then we eventually get one. So we're talking 6-7 months down the road after we've figured out that they've started construction. I will quickly touch on the fact that I think there should be a distinction between equipment and vehicle purchases versus labor. We don't need upfront for labor, obviously, and there's other things along that too, but we do need assistance for the things that we have to go under leases and contracts for, which is usually equipment and vehicles.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you,
Thank
Mayor
you.
Warris. Mr. Bigger?
Mr. Chairman, Jason Bager, and today I'm here on behalf of U.S. Gold Corp. I've worked both sides of this issue a little bit and certainly understand the communities and their need to have the resources they need when they need to do it. But wanted to kind of explain a little bit how the process works for a small development company in the mining sector. It seems like a lot of the frustrations is with a different sector. And it, definitely there's some ripple effects and unintended consequences. So back in 2020, U.S. Gold Corporation, which was a small development company at that time, had a market cap of maybe $5 to $6 million and about $1.5 million in the bank, picked up this project west of Laramie to begin moving forward. And at this point, for the small exploration company, it's all about de-risking. We gather data. Do you have enough data to provide comfort to go get some more funding, to do a little bit more, to do a little bit more? And so really over 3 years, they raised a little bit of money, and the first step was obtaining an industrial siting permit. And the work that goes into obtaining that permit starts about a year ahead of time. And you spend well in excess of 7 figures to do traffic studies and wildlife surveys. And, there's a lot of money out of pocket with that's completely at-risk capital that you're going out there to gather data to put together a permit with the hopes that you can do this. So in June of 2023, the industrial siting permit was issued with a number of conditions that needed to be met in order for things to move forward. At that point, the company was able to raise a little bit more money to start on the actual operating permits. So between 2023 and last December, the company obtained a mine operating permit from the Land Quality Division, a water discharge permit from the Water Quality Division, an air quality permit from the appropriate division, a county planning and use approval from Laramie County, and then there'll be other associated building permits when this thing moves into construction. So between the industrial siting permit being issued 3 years ago till now, nothing has happened because you still have to obtain those permits. But as you've met certain milestones, the company can either go raise more capital, issue more shares. So over the course of the last 5 years, they went from about 7 million outstanding shares to over 15 million outstanding shares. And that dilutes existing shareholders because you need to continue to raise capital. But to date, the company has spent just shy of $30 million out of their own pocket to just try to get the approvals to build the project. That doesn't mean it's moving forward yet. So last December, once we got the final permits, we were able to go, okay, we know the requirements that the company is going to be held to in order to do this project. So therefore, now we can do the last mile work on our reclamation. What sort of equipment do we need? Where do we need to place things? And so about 6 months was spent doing that type of work. And then you can go do a feasibility study going, well, what's it going to cost to order all of this equipment? And 5 years ago, that estimate was about $150 million. Now it's about $450 million. And working with our power provider, knowing we've got about a 2-year lead time to build 18 miles of 115 kV line to get it. There's just a lot that goes into it, and nothing is certain yet. So out of all 5 years of work, 3 years of industrial siting permit, We are just now at the point where we're able to go out and obtain financing. And that's everything from debt financing, which is going to a bank and trying to get somebody to lend it to you. You've got potential JV opportunities. You have potentially acquisition opportunities for somebody who wants to come in. You know, as a publicly traded company, at the end of the day, you're going to do what is best for the shareholders. So this thing could look a lot of different things. So going back to the idea of, well, talking about specifically our industrial siting permit, about $1.4 million was awarded to Laramie and Laramie County and the city of Cheyenne. If, as previously mentioned, you could even get a bond for that, it was mentioned 10%, more than likely on a small company like ours, that cost would be closer to 15 to 70% annual carrying costs. So that's not a one-time thing, that's every year. So the amount of money that the company would be expected to put forth year after year just to carry this thing, to try to get it across that goal line would be immense. And so as the CEO of US Gold says, if this deposit that we have in Laramie County, which is on a state section, so the state's going to earn, you know, royalties for school trust, typical ad valorem production property, all these things, significant impact to the state. But if this was a fabulously wealthy deposit, it would have been mined out in the late 1800s, like we saw Atlantic City and South Pass and all these things. There's still 1 million ounces of gold and 270 million pounds of copper. It's a massive project, but technology only got to the point in the last few years where you can economically mine that thing. So if you start adding incremental costs like this, it's kind of that death by 1,000 cuts, where eventually somebody's going to go, the math just doesn't work. We know there's a resource there, but we just can't economically extract this. So you're not going to get it financed. You're not going to get it bonded. And so these stacking financing for a project like this is really incredibly difficult. And so I guess just wanted to kind of share the experience of the company as we've moved through that and what placing a bond on a project like this, which is a small publicly traded company, would mean to the overall economics. So with that, be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Beggar. So with the bond, the reclamation bond is an annual fee as well, 10, 15, 20%?
Mr. Chairman, yes, there's a couple ways to go around a reclamation bond, but if you are truly bonding it with a financial instrument, it is an annual fee.
Okay, Senator Rofus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you very much. I think that gives a very realistic explanation of how these projects actually play out in terms of their actual timeline. But getting to the timeline concept, so 3 years ago, when you were applying for what it sounds like was effectively your first major permit, was industrial siting for the way your project went forward. I believe it's required in that application that you provide a timeline of your expectation for how the project will play out. Is that accurate?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, that is correct. And you have 2 years to start construction, and you can go back and ask for extensions. And the company has asked for 2 extensions for various reasons.
And Mr. Chairman, it seems to me that that might be part of what's creating an unrealistic belief in the results of the industrial siting project, or excuse me, process, is that we're requiring you to put forward a calendar, and there's no way any real project is going to follow the calendar. It's going to be your best hope calendar, I assume, is what you laid out there, right? This is if everything goes just exactly as we would hope, this is the calendar we'll provide, and then the real world happens and nobody ends up following that calendar. Is that a fair assessment?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, that's absolutely correct.
Okay.
It's the best guess with the information you have at that time.
And so, Mr. Chairman, that might be one of the problems that we're really running into, is an expectation that calendar is real. And I don't think we see it as ending up real very often. Thank you for that testimony.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Beggar. Appreciate your testimony. Any other public testimony? Anyone online, Heather? Okay. Good thing you jumped up there. We just about missed it.
Good afternoon, almost afternoon to you all. My name is Maria Catherine. I grew up in Casper and now live in Converse County. And I saw this morning the governor put out an executive order that we want to do the data centers the Wyoming way. And I thought, what does that even mean? So that's really why I came this morning to say that I'm hoping the legislature has some flexibility in this interim session, because the data centers tend to be put where there are data centers already. And so Cheyenne obviously is, that's happening there. It looks like Laramie, certainly Casper. And so I'm wondering if we can count on you to address this statewide question so that the communities don't have to figure this out for themselves every single time. And my hope would be that we can get that through some sort of industrial siting process that we already have in place. It's maybe it can be improved, but at least it has been effective in the state for a lot of years. So I'm hoping that you can take up the question of what we can do in the Wyoming way about these data centers and the challenge that they represent to our communities.
Well, thank you, Ms. Catherine. The data centers would go through the Industrial Siting Council, and I don't know how many that are in front of the council right now. They don't? Oh,
If they're not.
if they're in a park?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the problem that we're facing.
Yeah.
So I hope something in the interim could be thought about that, because it's a wave. It's headed our way.
Okay. Well, thank you for your testimony, Ms. Catherine.
Mr. Chairman, Brett Fanning is online.
Okay, good. Bring him up to the front. Mr.
Hello,
Fanning?
good morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, members of the committee. Brett Fanning, I'm the Director of the Wyoming Department of Revenue. And trying to read the room online, I'm going to try and keep my comments brief on this. We just have a limited role in this discussion. Mr. Chairman, so there's been a lot of discussion about the Department of Revenue and how we distribute these funds. I know Representative Riggins has mentioned them a couple times. We could distribute those funds. Right now, it goes to the county treasurer for impact assistance, and then the county treasurer divvies it on down the line. If it were the legislature's discretion to change that to we distribute it directly to the cities, towns, and counties, that's something we could do. We could make that happen. Another thought that crossed my mind as it relates to the language on page 2, kind of that lines 19 through 22, maybe putting in some timelines there. If that's part of the discussion, generally when we get our schedule from the Department of Environmental Quality, we're going to distribute that based upon their schedule. And that's usually pretty quick timeline on our side. So usually within a few months. Once we divvy it out to the county treasurers, I don't know how long it takes them to get it locally. My guess is it's pretty quick, but I'm not sure. So if a timeline wanted to be implemented in there, I don't think there'd be any concern as long as that was reasonable. Mr. Chairman, the second point I had was related to the amendments brought by the Department of Environmental Quality's leadership team as it relates to local government. In our distribution statutes, it's outside of the statute we're talking here. It's usually cities, towns, and counties. That's the verbiage that's consistent in the vast majority of our statutes. Updating that to local government could be done. But if you wanted the Department of Revenue to start distributing directly to something, or let me rephrase this, other entities outside of cities, towns, and counties, that may require some additional IT work on our side. But again, I just wanted to outline those. Trying to read the room electronically is a little hard, and I'm sorry I missed my dance first time around this morning. We didn't have any public comment. So I'd stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Director Fanning. So if some of these impact monies were earmarked to go to a special district, that would then go to the county treasurer first and then disseminated to that special district. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, yes, today, as of today, that's correct.
Okay, and we've heard a couple of comments about the lag time there when the money goes to the county treasurer. Sometimes it sounds like there's a little bit of a lag time before it's actually disseminated. So I appreciate your willingness to work with us on that, Director.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure on this? Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do intend to make a motion, but I not on this bill. I don't think that the bonding is the right way to go about it. So my motion would be to draft as a committee bill the bill that Brian sent us last month. It's 25 LSO 70, the draft 6 of that version, which does allow for upfront payments, but it does not require bonding. And really what this does, the way this bill, so I'll explain the bill if I can get a second on that. Right. So basically what this bill does, this is a bill that we worked in a working group a couple of years ago and has been vetted by multiple agencies. We worked through this process, and what this does is allows for upfront payment, and then the payback comes when the project starts. There are payments withheld back to the state throughout the entire length of that project. And so I think that that's the best way to address the upfront payment process, understanding that this does put the risk on the state. But the way I look at it is, if a local government is in need of a fire truck and this project falls through, a lot of our local governments have needed a fire truck 20 years ago. And if the state can support that, I think that that's a good thing. And I understand that projects fall through, but we heard earlier that I would say roughly 80% of projects go through and they are successful and they end up getting built. And so I think that that's something that I'm having a hard time in this conversation understanding why we're afraid to invest in our local communities. If a project falls through, why are we afraid? We're helping those local communities get something they need, or replace something that they have needed to replace for many years. Or if it's a water line and it's getting it out to an area that could be developed and that project falls through, I'm sure there's another company that would want to come in and develop something similar or something different. So I don't really think there's a lot of risk. I think it's just something that we can use to develop Wyoming and push Wyoming forward without putting further burden on business, as this process is already a major burden on business as it is. So
okay, so we have a motion on the table right now to bring a new draft in for our next meeting. Is that any discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that was a nod from you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support this motion. I worked on this work group. We've talked about it throughout this discussion, last meeting and this. I tried to bring it forward last meeting. I think we had a tie vote. I felt like we needed another alternative that addressed the same problem to consider, and we had put a considerable amount of work into it with many agencies, as was pointed out, vetting it. I think it's a much better approach. The approach also contemplated the role of the Industrial Siting Act in order to decide about when these advance payments would be made, and therefore in some way give a sort of a signal a little bit of when is maybe an appropriate time to order a fire truck and when we may not order it yet. Like, so there was a built-in kind of a little bit of that into it that I think helps with some of the issues of local governments maybe not being sure When is the best time to do that? When is it still time to wait? And so that's really an important part that I think the Industrial Siting Commission can give guidance on in just the way they structure those advance payments. So I do support bringing that bill back. Senator Roth worked on it with us. And again, I think it was a better solution for Wyoming to address what is a very real problem for our local communities as these big projects come in. So,
Okay.
thank
Any
you.
other discussion? Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm lost that we keep conflating that this is we're solving local community problems, purchasing fire trucks that needed. These are not general fire trucks. These are specialty firefighting equipment designed specifically to fight fires in an electrical environment in a solar farm. This is not your hook and ladder truck that the average community needs. These are very specific specialty pieces of equipment that have no application in a community setting. And I think that they need to be seen as a specialty item and not oh, this is a fire truck for the community. It's not the same.
Okay. Representative Knapp.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to speak against the motion. You know, the industrial siting process is a very specific process, and there's other avenues to help communities to get water lines in place through SLIB or have specialty equipment or buy a fire truck. There's other avenues besides industrial siting to do this. When it comes to a very specialized piece of equipment, oftentimes industry themselves provide that equipment on site. I know our local coal mines, and it's not, of course, the specialty engines, but when they require emergency services or fire equipment to be on site, they provide that themselves. They don't ask for government to pay for that. So, you know, I was interested in the original bill until we got into bonding. Because I agree that that is a detriment to projects even getting off the ground. So I just think there's other avenues besides the state government being on the hook to pay for speculative improvements or speculative equipment. This just isn't the place for it.
Okay. Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just thinking of the, you know, in this condition we're talking about here is the postponement of the start of projects, and not just a 90-day postponement. Those things you could handle as a town or community, but we're talking 2 or 3 year postponements. And so that money's been hanging out there, and this may not be exact approach to correct that. But I'm looking for any method that if you're going to postpone a project for multiple years and you've already have outlays, a good way to handle that and reimburse these communities.
Senator Office.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On for the amendments. And I think one thing that we have to do
The motion.
for the motion, my apologies, not an amendment. Thank you. I think, first of all, we have to realize that it's not an exception to the rule that there are delays, and it's not a flaw in the process that there are delays. We have designed a process where we unrealistically require a timeline to be accurate, and then we get mad when somebody doesn't follow an unrealistic timeline that can't possibly be accurate. So the delays are going to happen. It's not a bug, it's a feature, it's business, that's how things work. So we need a remedy for that. That's what we've heard, and I think we've reasonably heard that we need a remedy for that. This bill, which we worked on a couple of years ago, I think provides an appropriate remedy for it. It does put the risk on the state, but it puts the risk on the state while using the Industrial Siting Council to provide a little more guidance, help with that timeline, give them the flexibility to maybe not buy that highly specialized fire truck before there is groundbreaking, for example. Right, bring in some expertise and use some judgment about when things should actually take place. So I think there's a lot of features to the bill proposal that we're potentially going to look at next time and get redrafted that are not present in this bill draft. And I do think this bill draft that we had before us is a negative. It's bad for business, bad for economic development. So I support the motion to get that bill drafted and have a look at it next time. I think it solves the problem without hindering industry.
Okay. All right. The motion on the table is to bring back bill draft LSO 70, I think it was. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no.
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 All right, we got to need a show of hands. All those in favor, raise of hands. 3, 6, that motion passes. All right, Mr. Fuller, we'll bring that back for our next meeting then. All right. Whereas there's no motion on this bill draft, LSO 27 LSO 21, that dies for a lack of a motion. We will now break for lunch and come back and finish up on industrial siding. So we will break for lunch until 1:30 p.m. Mr. Fuller, you have any direction for us? Okay. 1:30.